Alrighty, everyone. Sorry about that. Hello, hello, hello. We are here. We are ready to start. Hopefully the title has updated for the stream. Let me double check one thing. Alrighty, perfect. So, we are here. Apologies for the late start. We had a slight cancellation, a slight change of plans, but we are ready to start. I'm going to go ahead and bring you all over to the guests so that we don't have to wait any longer. Here we go. So,
Fuck yeah.
now
I
we
like
have
how lots of
begun.
Aphex tunes are literally just like him basically demoing a piece of gear or whatever.
And I like how many of them are like kind of halfway done. Like he was just like doing
Yeah.
some kind of an experiment in the studio, and he's like, "Nah, I'm
Yeah.
an Apex Twin. I'll just put it out. Don't need to." Fix it."
Yeah, totally. Just doesn't give a shit.
Yeah.
Alrighty, so gentlemen, we are ready to start. Apologies.
Yeah, no worries.
So,
We're just talking about Aphex Twin and how like a lot of his music just sounds like it's him just demoing a piece of gear, and then it's just like a half-finished piece of music, and he just decides to put it out because Dylan was talking about how he has one of the Circlone sequences.
oh, fuck yeah. Well, hopefully we can kind of get into that and a lot more. So I guess we can start by just going around the room. I'm pretty sure most people here are known by most people in chat, but just for the sake of the podcast, we're going to go around clockwise, start with Mr. Bill. Why don't you introduce yourself, let everyone know who you are and what you're doing here.
Yeah. My name's Mr. Bill. I make tutorials, I write music, and I've been doing shit on the internet in this way for a long time. So yeah, hopefully everyone already knows me, but if they don't, I basically do the same shit Musa does.
Awesome. Up next, we have down here, Woulg.
Hello, I'm woulg. I make experimental music and I make my own Max for Live stuff. Been researching a lot of AI stuff recently. And yeah, I also make some tutorials, not nearly as busy as Mussar or Mr. Bill, but yeah, I do some tutorials and stuff on YouTube, and I stream every week as well.
Awesome. And then last but not least, again, thank you so much, by the way, for helping us out with this and filling in last minute. We have Ill.Gates.
Hey, what's up, everybody? My real name is Dylan. I'm known professionally as Ill.Gates. I've been producing and performing music for a real long time, and I also teach and I run a kind of renegade educational operation called Producer Dojo, where I have a team of producers who I have trained that are training the next generation of producers to make awesome music and be awesome people.
Hell yeah.
Oh, that's cool. I didn't know about that.
Yeah, I mean, I'm really excited, especially because I don't think we've ever really gotten a chance to talk before, Dylan. So I'm excited to finally get to kind of meet you under some weird circumstances, of course, but hi.
Yeah, thanks for having me on. It's a pleasure to be here.
I guess kind of one of the first subjects I did want to touch on, since everyone here, myself excluded, is in some way like a performing, touring artist. And I don't know how much this has been talked to death amongst yourselves, but how do you feel like things have changed under COVID-19 with all the new restrictions and with everything going on? Like, how has it affected like just your life?
Is that
It's kind of it's open discussion.
Oh,
It's a
it's open.
roundtable.
Okay,
So pretty much whoever wants to talk can talk.
Oh man, so I can say how it's affected my life, I guess. It's definitely slowed shit down. Like life has a much more leisurely pace now, that's for sure. It feels like when I was doing shows, I was, you have this thing to do every weekend, like a show. So you need to like cram a lot of work in during the week. A lot of time is spent building sets and making music specifically to play in those sets. So that whole element has been removed. So I just have a lot more time now, it seems like. So I've been learning a lot more shit. Like I've been learning a lot, like going real deep on modules that I didn't really know the full functionality of. And I've been learning to brew beer. And I've been like reading books and shit, which is something I've never done. Like it's
Hey, that's cool, Bill.
Nice.
Awesome.
Yeah. I'm actually like, and I just started doing Max for Live lessons with woulg, and like, there's just so much shit that I just didn't have time to do that I'm able to do now. And I know that that's like sort of this weird selfish, like on my pedestal way to look at it, because obviously the economy's fucked. 300 or however many million people are out of jobs, people are dying. Like, I understand this is all horrible, but for me, it's pretty fucking cool, actually. Like, I mean that just the whole situation has affected me in some ways positively.
You got to find some sort of good.
I think that's a really healthy way to look at it. And you know, when it was first starting out, I got really, you know, I would be watching or listening to the news quite often, and really just trying to kind of make sense of the world. And it was really stressing me out and making me upset. And you know, there's an efficacy to that in that, you know, it helps you to take, you know, hand washing and quarantine seriously and everything. But there was a real turning point for me where, you know, my wife said to me, she was just like, we need to start looking at COVID as a gift. And as fucked up as it is, we need to look at it as a gift, because that's the perspective that's going to enable us to be productive in this time. And, you know, you shouldn't feel guilty about seeing a silver lining, and you shouldn't feel guilty about putting a positive spin on it. Like, yes, people are dying. Yes, the economy is in shambles. But if you're going to be a productive member of society, you need to step out of the fear mindset and into, you know, a more positive mindset. And that's really, you know, that's really when I started to, you know, I started to just kind of become, you know, come out from under come out of the bunker and start, like, you know, just mentally come out of the bunker and start being more productive. And I think since that conversation, and since I started, you know, as cheesy as it sounds, viewing this crisis as an opportunity, then I've just developed a much more healthy relationship with it. I mean, I miss playing shows. Oh my God. Like, that's like my favorite thing in the world, is dropping new tracks that I've never played out with hordes of moshing maniacs all like frothing at the mouth, just like, fuck me with bass. You know, it's like it's the best feeling. I miss that. I miss my friends, you know, but you got to look at it as a gift. You know, you got to get it. You got to come out of the bunker and start being productive.
Totally. Yeah, I totally agree with that. I think it was interesting. I had the same sort of thing when it first started. I was like watching the news all the time. I have pretty bad anxiety too, so it like and I was in the hospital a couple of years ago with flesh-eating disease, so I was like, fuck ICU, I'm not going back there. I'm going to do everything to stay as safe as I can. And at the beginning, I was staying at my girlfriend's place, and she lives with her dad. So he's over 60, so we were trying to be super extra careful. I mean, we still are trying to be super extra careful, but after the first little bit of like, I was like, oh my God, everything's different now. I have time for all these projects and stuff. But then it was funny because I realized, like, oh no, like 90% of my life is online anyways. Like, I don't do shows that often. I very rarely play in Montreal, and then maybe once a year or sometimes a little bit more, sometimes even less than once a year. I'll like go on a tour. Or play in one place or another place, like kind of as a one-off, but it's not that often that I gig. So I had some gigs lined up for this AI project that I'm working on, and those got canceled. So which is kind of great, because it gave me a lot more time to work on the AI part, which I was still kind of lagging a bit behind on. But it made me really realize that, like, yeah, 90% of my life is already online, and which is something that I've been kind of trying to get to since I was like 19 or something. So it kind of made me realize, like, oh, okay, I did this. I'm in this position where I can live kind of wherever I want, and everything will just kind of go on as usual. But that also made me realize that, like, I don't have extra time because of this. This is like my schedule is the same. Like, if anything, it's a little bit more busy because all the other people the people that I'm doing contracts for and the people that take lessons from me have more time, so they want more things from me, right? So it's been super interesting. But yeah, I'd say that my day-to-day schedule hasn't changed much.
Yeah, I found kind of similar. I mean, obviously, like, I don't have the same sort of touring aspect to my career right now, but I definitely feel what Dylan was saying. Like, I am starting to get to the point where it's like, you know, you're going through the stages of grief and you're kind of processing everything, and then you start to see the light at the end of the tunnel. And, you know, even with all the bullshit that's going on, I have honestly found a lot of comfort in how most people are reacting to the situation. Most people I know have taken it as like, look, I really, really need to rethink the way that I am doing things, because either what I'm doing wasn't healthy or what I'm doing wasn't sustainable. And either way, like, if you are forced to make a big change, you might as well make it for the better.
Yeah, to me, it kind of feels like when when I was younger, and you guys all went to like secondary education schools, right? Like university and shit. It kind of feels like that again, because it's like when you go to university, it's like you sort of carve out these few years of your life where you know, don't really have another job or don't really do anything. So you literally have just like carved out this time for learning, right? And it kind of feels like after you finish that university time, everyone goes into the like work and gets like embedded in their careers and shit like that. And it's kind of like that ability to I think Dylan had to maybe attend to baby stuff. You kind of get embedded in your career and stuff, and you kind of get pulled out of not having, you know, all of that time to learn anymore. But I think we've kind of been given like a second opportunity there in that way, I guess, is how it kind of feels to me. Because you know how you walk into like a library or whatever and you can kind of feel everybody thinking?
Yeah.
I've felt like reality feels a little bit like that now. It's like everyone around me feels like everyone's sort of doing fulfilling shit. I mean, obviously I live in like a neighborhood where that's possible, but like, you know, it's like I notice a shitload of people are getting into like baking and stuff like that.
Yeah. I think I'm curious about that too, because I had a pretty like unproductive year this past year, and this has kind of coincided with me becoming more productive, and especially the last couple of weeks I've been able to get a lot more done.
Dude, Dylan's baby is
sorry, I got a little distracted by the child.
That's awesome.
It's like that. Did you ever see the video of like that foreign diplomat, that British guy who was like, he lives in like South Korea or something, and his daughter comes into the room and his wife comes, like, drags the baby out. I'm kind of experiencing that right now.
Yeah,
Welcome
sorry,
back.
I just had to deal with a baby invasion myself. Actually.
How is it?
Yeah, that's actually been a bit of a trip. I mean, I've been really glad because like I was on the road all the time, and you know, well, Bill and I were doing like a lot of dates actually right before things ended, and you know, I'd come back and you know, like I missed my daughter's first smile, you know, and stuff like that. But now that I'm home all the time, you know, I was there when she started walking. I was there for, you know, her first words and stuff, and I've been getting to spend a lot more time with her, which has been fantastic. But, you know, we can't have a nanny or anything. So it's like literally, you know, my wife and I we take turns. We'd have shifts, and it's like half of my day I'm hanging out with the 1-year-old, you know?
With the little monster.
So, you know, at one point I was like, oh, I'm going to have all this extra time. But before, you know, when I was playing shows, like I could afford a house cleaning staff. I could afford a cook. I could afford a nanny. You know, all that stuff was great. Now it's like I can't afford any of that stuff. And even if I could afford it, I can't have people coming in and out of my house all the time. So it's like, you know, I'm like Ill.Plates on the job, like making all the food and taking care of my daughter. But it's so great to be there for all those kind of like early, you know, toddler moments where you either catch it or you don't, you know. And I've been there for a lot of that, and I've been really like, you know, really getting to you know, to be a big part of my daughter's life. And she's like a really happy kid.
Hey,
you
that's
know,
awesome.
which really I think is great. Like she's just really, you know, she's emotionally just like really, she's very fearless, and all she wants to do is like play synths all day. It's pretty great. Like we got a piano in the living room, and she's just always like climbing up on the piano and going at it. You know, it's just like it's awesome, man. Like it's just
Yeah.
so fun to
Have
be a part of that.
Have you found it influence your music at all? I mean, I'm sure it has, but like,
Well, I mean, it's been hard to get like full uninterrupted days, which
mhm.
is really kind of like I work best when I just like do literally nothing but try to finish a piece of music that day. I find that's I get, you know, when you like kind of peck away at a
Same, for
song
sure.
with like an hour here, an hour there, they never quite come out as well as when you just have that like magic all in one go one day like. So I have not been able to have sessions like that, which is I feel you know, it's not ideal,
Mhm.
but at the same time, I've also not had these like 4 or 5 day chunks of being on the road where I'm just categorically away from the studio, and I can't work on things. So it's like, you know, I never really get all the way in, but I also never really get all the way out of the headspace. And it's so I've been kind of like, you know, I've been kind of doing a lot more sound design sessions,
Oh fuck yeah.
and I've been doing a lot more resampling sessions where I've been, you know, just populating like this huge big folder of sounds that are original that I've been using. And like the other day, I made a custom 808 type sound on my Moog One. Like made this like, you know, sine oscillator and got it sitting how I wanted it, and then made that into like an 808. And then I just sat there running it through every different kind of analog model distortion in my whole arsenal. And I made this folder where it's just like, you know, like Baskin Robbins flavors of 808 distortion, and then I put them on a sample selector, and now I have this rack that is just like, you know, you could have one part of the song where it's the 808 running through a transistor, and then one part of the song where it's the 808 running through trash, and then one part of the song where it's the 808 running through snap heap, and you just turn this knob, and the 808 just like mutates
That's
and
sick.
through all these different types of distortion. I'm like, that instrument, I'm going to use that instrument the rest of my career. Like it's a fantastic tool, and now I have that forever, you know. So I've been getting a lot more of these kind of things like that done, and a lot more, you know, a lot more of the housekeeping type of stuff
I was
done.
about to
Like,
say, it feels like a lot of like the more custodial work is like perfect quarantine behavior.
yeah, all this stuff I've been putting off, and then like I went through this hard drive and I found this like huge folder of camcorder footage from like many years that I had lost. And there's like an interview of Mr. Bill that I had lost that I posted up the other day, and then I've got an interview with Manic Focus and Hero Bust and like all of these just like crazy cool videos that I'd forgotten, like footage from shows that I'd forgotten about and stuff. And so it's been like, I found
Wow.
a bunch of art that I made and forgot about. You know, it's been really cool finding all that stuff.
Nice.
Yeah, I kind of did a similar thing at the start
That's
of quarantine. I built this computer behind me here, and before I like loaded any sample onto it, I basically like put all of the stuff from this old computer, my rack computer, on a hard drive, and then used that as like a conduit to go between the old computer and the new computer, and then like whilst on that hard drive, like really organized it all going into the new computer, and yeah, organized like all my samples super well, and then organized like all my old sound design files that I'd found into like really nice folders. So now like my own sound design folder is like super fucking organized, and like if I wanted, I could probably just like easily turn it into many sample packs and sell them for money. And then on top of that, the other thing I noticed is like I tried to write a tune after I'd organized everything, and it took me like 30 minutes to write a song. I was like, this feels too fucking easy now.
Nice.
Have you done any of that, Wolg? Or
No. No, I really like things. Yeah, things haven't changed. I mean, I ended up finding the time to finally do my taxes, which is cool.
You should just like pay a guy to do that, right?
Yeah, I gotta Yeah, I'm all my shit's all out of order, so it's hard to find all the pay stubs and stuff, or
Dude,
all the
it's like
invoices and
every
shit.
artist's tax, it seems like, is out of order. Hey, it's almost like there
Yeah.
needs to just be like this universal guy who just figures it out for artists or something.
Yeah, that comes to your house and digs through all your shit.
Yeah, I hate those administrators. It's like applying for a visa or something too. It's like
Yeah,
you
it's
can pay
brutal.
people to do it for you, but it's like there's so many aspects of the project that only you can do, and it's so boring and so not
Yeah.
creative, and it's like you have to do it yourself, and it's just
Yeah.
I hate that kind of shit. I hate it.
It's so painful, yeah. But yeah, so that stuff, and then I ended up taking some AI courses to kind of up my knowledge of that. Which, by the way, if anybody's interested in AI stuff, Google has a fucking sweet crash course on it. Called
I'm
Machine
very
Learning
interested in
Crash Course.
AI. What's the course called?
It's called Google Machine Learning Crash Course. It's super great. Like the first kind of chunk of the lesson is all like there's a lot of video lessons, there's a lot of programming exercises, there's a lot of like messing around with the AI playground thing which they made, which kind of makes it easier to understand what's going on exactly in your model. So I did a ton of that and just like really trying to figure out this thing. I'm trying to make an AI that like writes chord progressions in my style instead of just in like classical music style.
So you would need, because from what I understand with machine learning, it's like all got to do with the data set you feed it, right? So
Yeah.
Are you just sort of like building another tool to go through all your project files and export all the MIDI, or?
No, I did it slightly differently. I made a tool that makes writing chord progressions super easy.
Okay.
And then I wrote probably 40 or 50 of them, and then I did like standard manipulations of them, so like changing mode, like so for each one there's like the same thing but in a different mode, with different chord voicings and stuff like that. So I just kind of modulated the data set, and I think I can't remember how many progressions I got. Oh no, I remember now. There's like 3,000 or 4,000 chord progressions in there now. So that's what I'm training my model on. But yeah, it depends how you set your model up, like how big of a data set you need. But yeah, in that kind of thousands area is like
that seems like a lot. Because for instance, like Yarn is working on Splitter right now, right? And Splitter is this thing that like easily splits.
So cool.
It's very cool, but
it's fucking awesome.
So Deezer originally trained the model on 150 stem sets, but it was all from like rock and pop music. So what we're doing currently is we're hitting up producers to send us electronic stems so we can train it on electronic stems. But we apparently, according to Yarn, we only need 150 stem sets, which is not that many.
That's because your data is a lot denser. For audio data, you have 44,100 like data points per second, right?
That's a good
so
point.
Your data is a lot denser. It depends on what you're trying to do with the data and all that sort of shit. Like, it's really, that's why AI stuff is interesting to learn, because you learn the answers to all that stuff.
Right. Yeah. True.
Yeah.
Have any been learning any other kind of like outside of music skills? Like Woulg's been working on, like I've actually been trying to learn a programming language right now.
Which one?
Oh, dude. Sorry, go on. Yeah, I was gonna say I have.
What were you gonna say? I'm more interested in what y'all have to say. I'm the host. I'm not necessarily a guest.
I was gonna say there's something that I've like been wanting to learn for a long ass time and have always historically hated doing is video editing. But after building this new computer and having like a really sick graphics card in it, I've been getting massively into DaVinci Resolve and a lot of video. Like the other day, I just hit up my Discord and was like, "Hey, somebody send me something to edit." So NF recorded a tutorial on Go because he was one of the like people who developed the Go language at Google, and he just like sent me a screen cap of his screen and then a video of his face and some audio of him talking, and then I just like edited a full tutorial for him just because I felt like getting better at Resolve.
Oh, sick.
Which was cool.
Dude, I need so much video editing right now.
Nice.
I'm
Dude,
actually
give me some projects, man.
Yeah. Okay. Cool. Well, I've been working on because I used to do my performances, audio, video performances. Like when I was doing, like for years. I mean, a lot of people don't know this about me, but like back in 2008, you know, I kind of got my start in the music industry as Bass Nectar's VJ, and it was me and Android Jones were doing like visuals for Lauren's performances, and then I'd get to open here and there and stuff. But I, for the longest time, was doing fully synced audio video performances where I'd have edited music videos for all my tracks. And like, let's say I was playing a rap video, I'd use this plugin with Serato where it would be on the turntable and you could like scratch it and watch the word come in and out of the rapper's mouth. Like it was like that accurate and that able to be spontaneous. Cool. So the reason why I stopped doing that is because at most events, the audio and the video are on two separate circuits to prevent you from hearing the motors of the lights through the sound system, for example, right? So when you are doing an audio video synced performance and your computer is the nexus point between the two separate isolated circuits, you get ground loop phase interference running in your computer, and it starts making the hard drives sketch out and stuff, and it starts like you'll hear the projector and the motors on the lights and stuff coming through the sound system. So you have to like ground lift stuff and do all this kind of sketchy electrical things and run these big long cable runs, because normally the VJ is at front of house in the sound booth. The VJ is not on the stage, and the VJ computer is not connected to the sound system. So I eventually got sick of doing these like 6-hour really stressful sound checks and having like a single point of failure where you know you have one computer that can go down and your whole set goes down, as opposed to having like CDJs and an MPC, which is what I do now, where you have like, you know, 3 CDJs that can fail and an MPC that can fail. So like all 4 things have to fail simultaneously before you have silence, right?
That's interesting. I've never thought about it in that way of like multiple points of failure. Like the redundancy gives you the security. I've always thought of it as like the amount of things that you have are like the amount of moving pieces that you have to make all of them work for the thing to work. That's so interesting.
Dude, speaking about redundant systems, this is something that would be interesting to talk to KJ Sorka about, because he's the drummer for Pendulum, right?
Yeah.
And he has told me so many times that the system they use for Pendulum is literally their entire live setup times 2. Which means that if anything in the first live setup fails, they have this like piece of gear. I can't remember what it's called, but basically it's a piece of gear that listens or looks for this incoming message, right? And the incoming message is like silent noise on a channel that's muted. Yeah. And as soon as it sees that message go away, it just flips to the other system instantly.
Stefan Jacobs and Henry Strange over at Strange Media, they do the playback for like ASAP Rocky and all these other big bands, like Brockhampton. And Stefan showed me this rig that they have, and they basically have 2 UAD Apollo sound cards, and they're running like live auto tune on all the mics, and all the mics go into both of the sound cards. And then they have this Max for Live patch that called Playlist, and it has like a list of all of the songs in the set, and then they can change the order of the songs, and then the trigger for that goes out to 2 different computers that have the whole set in arrange mode with all the lighting and the video cues and everything, and then there's arrangement flags in Ableton, and when the Max for Live Playlist app triggers the arrangement flag, it will jump to a different point in the linear arrangement. So the Max for Live patch means that you can use the arrange view in a non-linear way, so that you can change the set list from night to night. But then because all of the actual video and audio cues and the auto-tune, you know, notes and the delays and everything are all in this linear view, you can take advantage of a much finer and more detailed level of control over the set. Right, so you can kind of have your linear cake and eat it too by having this non-linear Max for Live patch that arranges everything, and then you have the two setups, and then they go to 2 sound cards, and the one sound card is side chaining the other sound card out of the way with that white noise signal that's silent, and then when one of them goes down, the other one pops up instantly, and there's not even a pop or a click or anything, and it goes back and forth. So a lot of people who are using computers on the stage whether they're doing audio video setups or not. A lot of people are using computers on the stage. They have to have these redundant setups. And Lauren Bassnectar, a very good friend of mine, I built his live setup. At least what went on to become his live setup. He's had a lot of other people work on his setup since. But he has 2 computers on stage. You always see there's like these 2 light up kind of like, it looks like he's playing that Battleship game. Because there's these protector things that come up and they have the glowing Bassnectar logo and it kind of like protects the laptop from flying drinks and such. And he has 2 of those on each side of the stage, and he has to have another guy who's basically like he's got his live setup is the same on both the computers and it syncs to the cloud, but then he has to have another person who's looking at what he's doing and loading in the same clip packs on the second computer, kind of crouching behind the deck. So every now and then you get some idiot who sees this person crouching and operating the second computer, and they, make the erroneous assumption that, of course, Lauren is fake DJing, and this person who's crouching back there is actually doing it for them. And they'll take a video on their cell phone, and they'll be like, Bassnectar exposed, Illuminati confirmed, and then like post it up on social media and shit. It becomes fucking ridiculous. But yeah, so anyway, so because of those technical limitations, I had stopped doing my audio video synced live sets. I've been like, look, I'm just going to I'll just hand my video clips to the house VJ and let them do it. I'm not going to do these synced live audio video sets. But now that I don't have these issues anymore because the setup is at my house, I can do my fully synced audio video live sets. So I've been doing these COVID performances where I'm playing music videos for every track, and I've got like all these videos that I've made over decades that are now usable again. And I've been doing these like audio video live sets. So I need videos edited for all of my new tracks. So Bill, if you're looking for a project, why don't you edit up a video for our new tune, Kabatsu, which is coming out really soon.
Sponsored content.
I talked about this last night on my stream. Somebody was asking if I would ever collab with Virtual Riot again, and I was like, funny story.
Yeah, I actually hung out with him the other day. I went over to his studio for a bit. He's a great guy. I love him.
Yeah, Valentin's great. Just has very strict management, as do a lot of big dubstep artists.
Yeah.
Well, do you mind retelling that story, Bill?
Oh, yeah, boy. Of course. I'd love to.
Here we go.
Right. So we wrote a song, right, in Dylan's studio with
a banger.
Yeah, it's a fucking sick banger. Like, it's a really sick tune. And then when it came to being like, all right, cool, this is finished, let's put it out, we got a conversation going with all of our management, and basically his management were like, we're not comfortable putting his name on the tune, because basically the answer was, when we dug for the answer a little further, it basically turned out that we're just not big enough for him to have his name on a tune with us.
Oh, no.
So essentially, I guess like what they're trying to do is like punch up, right? Like they're trying to just collab with bigger and bigger and bigger and bigger people, because that in people's mindsets builds you up to look bigger and bigger, which is smart. I mean, like, it's definitely what you want to do if you want to keep like, getting bigger and bigger, for sure. Like it would look weird for Virtual Riot to put a collab out with somebody on the internet who's got like fucking 100 SoundCloud followers or something like that. It would, in people's minds, maybe make him look like a smaller artist or whatever. Personally, I'm not that way at all.
I don't give a shit. I collaborate with like non-musicians sometimes. Like, I'll just have a friend who is over that day, and I'll give them a full co-prod credit just to be cool. Yeah,
I mean, I do the same thing. I'm more interested in like writing cool music with cool people and exposing small artists who deserve exposure because they're cool. But I mean, even in this case, it doesn't make sense, because like, not to like toot our own horns, but we've both been doing this for like a fucking over a decade. It's like, we're not exactly small names. Like, a lot of people in the production industry like know who we are and respect us for what we've done and all of that kind of stuff. So I think it was a weird decision, but it's like, whatever. So anyway, the tune will come out, but you just won't know that it has come out as a Virtual Riot collab because his name won't be on it, I guess, is the
Yeah.
Are you allowed to still have him on like the writer's credits?
Yeah, I mean, we have to put him on the writer's credits and still pay him on the back end, but like his name just won't be on the tune on the front end.
Yeah, it's a bit sad, but I mean, I kind of understand, but I'm just not one of those people who's just the tracks, but it's just like, you know, those kinds of management decisions, like I understand why people make them and stuff, but I'm personally, I'm my goal is to be happy and to be making music for the rest of my life and to be able to just like enjoy myself and enjoy creating art and just like, you know, like I honestly, I'm not trying to, it's not a competition to me, you know, it's just like, it's just what I do. It's like I wake up, I have a shower, I eat breakfast, I make music, you know, it's like a bodily function. And I just want that to just be as healthy as it can be. So I find like being super calculating and competitive about shit, it just like, it bums me out, you know, and it's like that old cliche, like comparison is the thief of joy, you know? And I know a lot of people who are super, super competitive about it. And a lot of those people, it's like, it's not good for your happiness, you know? It's not good for your happiness.
I mean, I feel like there's like so many other things you could be competitive in without having to make it about like your financial stability. You know what I mean? And that's what it feels like here. Like, I don't know if you, this might be a good other topic to move to, but I've talked with Bill on his podcast about like my time production challenges. It's something I do on this stream almost like multiple times a week. Yeah, and it's like set yourself a 20-minute timer and do a thing. And like that in of itself is a competition. It's like you're challenging yourself from the past. I did this once. What happens when I do it in the future? How does it improve? How does it develop? And what can I do to make myself better that next time? So
hey, I got a hot timer tip for you.
Okay.
Okay. So there's this app called Seconds Pro that they use for training, like interval training for athletes.
Yeah, actually,
I repurposed it to do music production, and then you can program in the robot lady to tell you these different stages. And these are my favorite 6 stages. So,
chop samples for 5 minutes. Make some sequences for 5 minutes. Add drums and subs for 5 minutes. Find your riffs for 5 minutes. Make it drop for 5 minutes. Arrange and automate for 5 minutes.
Okay, so write down those steps. Do those 6 steps in that order, and you can get a track in half an hour. It's awesome.
Yeah. How do we feel about like
That's cool.
workflow and stuff like that? Like, do you find that challenges are good for, or those timers are good for your workflow? Like,
well, okay. So there's many different recipes when you're making music, and it's important to master formulas as such. And it's important to cross the finish line a large number of times so that you know how to get out of the weeds. And you know how to make sure that you can finish a track, because when you're ready to really make like art and really push yourself and try and make the best thing that you can, a big part of that is getting lost. A big part of that is going off the beaten path, throwing the rules out the window, letting the white rabbit take you down the rabbit hole, you know? But if you take someone who's never finished a track before, they're already lost. They're already, and you can just chase that white rabbit down all these tangential trails and just end up with a big fucking mess and nothing to show for your efforts, but feelings of inadequacy and self-doubt. And until you've finished a number of tracks, right, you don't know how to get out of the weeds. So the whole point of these timers and workflows and that I teach people is so that you know how to finish. And if you learn finishing first, then you can complicate the process more and more and more. And then eventually you can get to the point where finishing is second nature. And when finishing is second nature, then you throw the rules out the window. You break all the rules. You do all the sound design you want while you're writing. You use your newest and weirdest plugins. I throw an obstacle into your path every time to challenge yourself and make your process different, right? But if you start by throwing a bunch of obstacles in your way and getting lost and going down the rabbit hole, if you start by doing that, you're just gonna get bummed out.
Dude, it's funny. I was actually thinking about something similar right before we jumped on the call, and that was that I was actually thinking about it in relation to the lesson that I did with Woulg yesterday about Max for Live stuff. and how just like, for instance, the very last thing we did is we needed to like get a signal and delay it by a little bit just to like bang this thing slightly later to get a print message or something like that. And just the way that he got the message out of it was just a really weird way of doing it. And then I was like, oh, I won't even like get into explaining why it was weird, but like there was like another thing that I was like, well, couldn't you just do it with like this one other thing? And he was like, oh yeah, but like anyway, my point is that like when I first got into writing music, I made a very big point of never saving presets, and a lot of the time not saving tracks. And the reason I did that was because I figured if I could like every time I wanted to make a sound, right, I could just make it really quickly, and then I would like, rather than front loading my work, so like spending 6 months making a bunch of sounds and then just having those sounds to use, instead I like built the skill of being fast at doing things, like making a new sound really quickly. And I feel like that was a more important skill to build than actually hoarding a set of sounds or whatever. And I guess like it's kind of the same with what you're saying. It's like really what you're doing is like, instead of using all of this time to actually create like tangible files on your hard drive that you can then use later, which is what a lot of people tell you to do, you're saying instead spend your time just building the skill, and then going forward in the future it's going to be like super beneficial because you're just going to be able to like pump stuff out really quickly. And I totally agree, but I just kind of went about it a slightly different way, I guess.
Yeah, I 100% agree with you. I think, or both of you guys, it's like, yeah, getting those skills and practicing all the parts of the process so that, yeah, exactly like you said, like when you get in the weeds later, then you know how to get out of the weeds. That's wicked.
It's kind of like it's easier to learn how to turn a shitty song into a good song than it is to learn how to finish a shitty song.
Yeah.
And like I was honestly, I was thinking about this this morning because there was a conversation I was having in another community about like, I am good at all these things, but I just can't finish songs. And there always seems to be some kind of like cognitive block that's at the core of it. It's not like
that's the biggest problem that people have is finishing. They think that quality is a matter of being super anal about each individual step, and like, oh well, if I use the highest quality equalizer, then my music will be high quality. So before I learn to finish songs, I'm going to study how EQs work and compare every single EQ plugin. And it's like, that's not going to help you, homie.
But it almost
learn how to finish music.
Yeah, but like also then you can get into the whole conversation of like, what is a finished piece of music, right? Like, because there's pieces of music that have all of the parts, like it ticks all the boxes. It's like has drum beat, has melody, is mixed well, has some sound design that I made in it, has some sound design that friends made in it, has a good melody that I believe is catchy, has a harmony, has a A-B section and a cadence and a fucking build breakdown and an intro. Like, it can tick all of those boxes, but you can still listen to it and be like, it's just not fucking there, And sometimes I found what it takes to actually finish a song is like, when you have something like that that's ticked all its boxes, sometimes it just you'll just be like, it's not, I just don't like it, and you just put it away. And other times what I found,
it can be finished and not
hold on. Another
know,
thing for sure, but another thing that I found I do a lot is like, when I have one of those things that ticks all of those boxes, rather than actually do anything more to the track, I just have to like change my worldview to like look at it from a different perspective and to see it as finished. And sometimes that can take like 6 months.
Oh yeah, I mean, I've definitely had songs that like I ground them, or I felt like I ground them into dirt, and then I was like, this song is just garbage, I'm not gonna ever put it out. I look at it like 6 months down the road and I'm like, oh, this song's actually a pretty good tune. I just was so nose deep into like Dylan was saying, into the weeds of just everything that I couldn't see the forest for the trees.
Somebody's saying in the chat now, there's a difference between finishing a song and ending a song, which is exactly what I'm talking about, I guess.
Yeah.
Oh yeah. Well, it's like that classic saying, a piece of art is never finished, only surrendered.
Oh yeah. What is it? Art is not finished, only abandoned.
Yeah.
Whatever. Yeah. I think it was it Da Vinci that said that shit? Hold on, let me see.
Some
Art
fancy
is
word.
only.
I love it. I love that we can look things up. Remember when you could just win an argument by lying with the
Yeah,
most
yeah.
confidence? It was great. You could
dude.
just assert some bullshit confidently, and people would be like, "Oh, well,
Yeah,
he
it was
seems
Da
really
Vinci.
confident in that." So
Right. Yeah, it's probably fine. Yeah, I saw. Was there a thing where Joe Rogan was like having an argument with some scientist or whatever, and every time the scientist would like make a thing, he'd just be like, "Jamie, look that up," and then the scientist was like, "You realize this isn't a fair debate, right? Because I don't have a fucking Jamie to just look anything up for me right now." Dude, did you see Joe Rogan's podcast just got bought for
yeah,
more than
Spotify.
Spotify,
dude,
yeah.
$100 million by Spotify.
What?
Yeah,
Yeah,
well
they-
now you know what they're doing with all the music or the money that they're not paying musicians. Now you know what they're doing with it.
Oh
Yeah,
yeah.
yeah, they're giving it to Joe Rogan.
Yeah.
Good point. Yeah. Yeah, that's always one of those things, right? It's like when you tell your friend you're broke, but then you like fucking buy an air fryer or something, and then they're like, "What the fuck?"
I'm broke when it comes to hanging out. Okay, I'm not broke
Right.
when it comes to doing things for me. Okay,
Or
there's
when
me
people
money,
don't-
and there's you money.
When people don't have money for concert tickets, but they definitely have money for alcohol at the bar and cocaine.
Right. Yeah.
I'm
yeah.
like, you realize the ticket costs way less than both of those things, and you're hitting me up for guest list, and
I'm
Yeah. Today I learned cocaine and alcohol is Joe Rogan.
yeah, I don't know about that. I don't know if
I
that's a
kind
fair
of have a
equivalent.
question kind of on what you just mentioned. This is again like kind of just open to the floor. Like, what do we think is going to happen to like club music going through COVID and going out to the other side? Like, I'm not super stoked to go back into a room with a bunch of strangers who are on substances and just kind of, being sweaty.
Yeah, there's been a whole like trauma that has been incurred by everyone, I think. And yeah, I think anyone with half a brain is going to be like, oh yeah, probably let's not go into a club for a while. And so that's going to take a while to normalize, probably a few years, and then probably also a vaccine and shit like that. But dude, I see people now who I've followed so many people on Instagram because of this. Like, I'll check their story and it's just them hanging out with all their friends, like having drinks in a backyard or something. And I'm just like, and then the next day they'll be like with another whole group of friends, like drinking in another backyard or something like that. And I'm just like, you guys are the biggest fucking morons, and unfollow them, because like that kind of behavior, like in a time like this, to me is just the most insane shit. And I don't want to know anyone
Yeah, it's a lot
who
of-
is like that.
Like, just like willful ignorance almost.
Yeah, totally.
Yeah.
So yeah, I mean, I think anyone, but that I guess my point that I'm trying to make is, like, you asked, like, will clubs just come back? The answer is probably yes, because there's a lot of fucking idiots out there like that who will just be like, I don't give a shit, fuck it, and then I mean, maybe it'll be like a natural selection type thing or something. But like, I think most people like us probably won't be going to a club anytime soon, right? Like, I think we're probably all in agreement that it's not a good idea for a while.
Absolutely.
Yeah, I think like once people, like, I personally, I love being in a large group of people with a big sound system and the bass just like ripping through my body and shaking my eyeballs and like looking at the person next to me and being like, are you fucking hearing this shit right now? Like, can you believe this? I love that. I love that.
too.
I can't wait for that to happen again, man. Like, I'm as grossed out by the human body and by large groups of humans, and I'm disgusted by people's behavior. Like, alcohol and drugs and groups brings out the worst in people. Like, I was disgusted by that from the get-go. Like, if I go to the bathroom and I see someone else use the bathroom and leave without washing their hands, I judge the fuck out of that person. I am like, you are part of the problem, homie. Like, what? I like, I'm on team disgust for sure. But at the same time, there's that sharing, like the camaraderie of awe, the camaraderie of shared awe.
No,
I feel has a healing effect on the human soul. And, most of the problems that we have in our society, and especially most of the moral problems that we have, I think can be traced back to a failure of compassion and a failure to consider the other as morally valuable as the self, you know. And I think that like the really compassion and that movement from the self to the other is really that is the movement that leads us into grace and that leads us to be better people and that leads us to act in such a way that we can build a viable shared future, you know. And it's that selfishness when you're cut off from other people and there's no one else to like witness your moment of indulgence or selfishness, you feel like you're quote unquote getting away with things, and that moment of conscience is not triggered. That's why like a lot of like retail outlets still have mirrors set at eye level around the retail store, because when people make eye contact with themselves in the mirror, psychologically it triggers that, oh shit, I shouldn't shoplift.
That's some
right?
panopticon shit too.
Yeah, and it's like, you know, we need to share experience with other people. We need to share awe with other people, because the you know the cultural value of beauty is that it unifies us and it leads us in an effortless and natural way. And when we share an experience of awe and share an experience of beauty with other people, we stop thinking about like, oh yeah, you know, maybe this person has differing opinions from me on something, or maybe this person belongs to a different demographic than I do. You stop thinking about that shit and you connect with them, and you team up in that moment, like subconsciously when you're there and that the bass drops and you're there with another person, you're like, holy fuck, I can't, are you seeing this? Are you hearing this? And that moment forges fucking team humanity, man. And I, you know, there's been a, like, if you look at all the measures of human progress, like, you know, child mortality, you know, war casualties, sanitation, education, women's rights, all that shit is trending upwards. All that shit is trending upwards.
Do you not think that this thing of awe can happen like not in person though? Like for instance, if there's if there's a solar eclipse, right? Or like, you know, maybe if on TV, you know, there's obviously we're way past this now, but like, you know, when there was the first like shuttles being launched into space and everyone was like huddled around their TVs in their own lounge rooms, like watching that, like I think that kind of feeling can sort of emanate, and this is like maybe a bit hippie to say, and it's the same thing as I was saying before, where you can just sort of feel everyone thinking. It's like you can kind of, when something like that happens, you can kind of feel the awe through humanity of like everyone just being stoked about something, right?
Yeah, I think it can. I think it can happen without being in a physical space. But I think that, you know, we really crave that, and you know, people love like sporting events or, you know, other kind of shared experiences for that. And you know, it is possible to have that outside of the context of like a group shared experience. But I you know, I think that, you know, we really do need that, you know, like humanity really does need that. And I fear that if we are all isolated and just, you know, connecting only through the virtual realm, that it's going to be really easy for many of us to slip into this kind of like mindset of selfish indulgence and let go of our collectivist approach and just become self-destructive and collectively destructive from the isolation.
I actually
agree with that oh, sorry to cut you off.
No, please go ahead. Go ahead.
Yeah, it's interesting because my whole life I was kind of more thinking the way that Bill was saying, but this has really made me realize how like yeah, we need those. We really need those, and at least me, I really need those in-person moments. And I'm pretty fucking introverted, so I don't need a lot of them. But at least I don't need a whole ton of them with a whole ton of different people. But like, yeah, it is definitely something that I need to like have those shared human experiences, person to person, like in RL or IRL. But I think like there's definitely a lot of things that can be online and that I think are really good if they're online. And I think the nice thing about everybody kind of being pushed into doing more virtual concerts and people being more involved in virtual spaces is that some of those things, like the reason that I've always been super into like connecting with people on the internet and virtual space and stuff is that there's I grew up in Calgary, and there's just not that many people who are into experimental music in Calgary, and I didn't really know that many who were. There was maybe a handful that were actually good at it, or that I actually got a
Little Snake.
Yeah, I know. It was so, he hit me up on Instagram, and he was like, "Oh yeah, I'm from Calgary too," and I was like, "What?" And yeah, and then it turns out that we like hung out at all the same places and stuff. He's like, I think quite a few years younger than me though, so that's why I didn't know him before. But yeah, so anyway, so I really sought out those virtual spaces because it was the only place where I could really talk with like-minded people and like have this kind of back and forth with like-minded people. And there are a lot of people in the world who like are in places where their particular interests are not particularly popular, and I think it's really powerful for those kind of people. And also I think about virtual concerts and stuff. I think, for example, with quite a fair bit of my music, I think while I really like hearing it on a big sound system, and it's really satisfying to do that, I think there's different types of sets that lend themselves a lot better to being in your own personal bubble with a pair of headphones or on your own studio monitors. Like the potential to be able to play on, 100, 200, 1,000 people's studio monitors at the same time is pretty cool. Like, or their favorite pair of headphones that they know really, really well, that they really like the sound of. I think that's kind of a really interesting avenue, and I am really looking forward to seeing.
There are some people that are really nailing it too.
Mm-hmm.
Did you see last week? Did you see the 2020 London podcast or 2020 London broadcast where they had the Amon Tobin's Two Fingers
cool.
album? They had a Two
one.
Fingers album launch. G Jones, Ivy Lab, and Little Snake, all back to back, half-hour sets, and they each had their own like VJ like visual performance. It was so sick. They have another one today with Matt Zach is playing. It's in a couple hours, but it was honestly those 2020 performances. That's the coolest shit I've seen since COVID.
I actually have I'm glad that. Sorry, did you want to say something, Bill?
No, I'm good.
Oh, for sure. Sorry, I thought you were saying something. But I'm glad that Will brought up these online music festivals, or the IRL versus URL fest kind of thing, because like it is almost at the point where I'm worried that it's kind of too much of a good thing. Because like it was so cool the first time you had the Minecraft Music Festival, like Coachella or whatever. That was really, really clever, and it was witty, and it was new, and now like everyone is doing a Minecraft festival or some sort of Twitch festival, and it's sort of as if nothing has changed from just that constant barrage of festivals and shows that you gotta go to, or you're missing out this artist or that artist, and it's just a big gamut. And it's like, I didn't even know that this G Jones and Little Snake thing happened. Because
dude, watch the one today. It starts in a couple hours. Watch the one today.
Yeah.
It's gonna
There's
be
another
sick.
one like the Whittler who was in the stream right now. Or just a little while ago. He's about to be on a little DJ festival thing that someone else is putting on. I don't even know where it is. There's like so many things. Like, do we feel like they're kind of maybe overdoing it, or is this a good thing? Like, do we think it's gonna like stick around, or do we think that like these are gonna go away?
I don't think they're overdoing. I mean, it's hyper saturated now because everything shifted to virtual. But when this stuff. And I think it's going to get more and more saturated for the next bit. But when you think about like the shows that you had access to go to were like they have to be within a reasonable distance to get to, and you have to be able to afford to get to them. So your list of available shows was limited by these kind of real world factors. But now your list of available like things that you can attend is not limited by any geographical and not even most of these things are free, right? Like they're not limited by any monetary factor either, right? So that like really changes the game. So I think we can expect to see way more of them. until we kind of get to that level of like the amount of shows that there was in every city, except they're all online, and then probably COVID stuff will peter out, and we'll get kind of a half and half division again, or something like that.
I'm kind of afraid that people are going to get so good at this, the URL concert space, that when IRL concert space opens up again, you're going to have people be like, yeah, well, you know, I don't really have that much money. I could pay $20 to go see this act live, or I could spend that $20 on drugs and then just stay at my house and fucking, you know, dance in my living room.
I think, honestly, I think it's just it's going to be a very short amount of time until you have to pay to get into these virtual concerts.
That's not true, actually. There's already one coming.
There you go. Yeah,
there's already the first one that I know of. There's there's basically an Anjuna Records Minecraft festival that Matt Zoe's putting on, where it's like it's only like $5, but the idea is he's going to try and pay the talent that performs.
That's sick.
I actually I started this, and this might be something that those of you who are musicians who are kind of looking to figure out a new way to support yourself, a way for your fans to support you. I actually I rebooted my whole Patreon last week, and I created this new $5 a month concert goer tier in my Patreon, where you not only get invited to private concerts that I'm putting on that are only for my Patreon patrons, but whenever I do one of these other live performances, I'm not making the recordings of these audio video sets that I'm doing available, but the recordings are available in my Patreon. So the replays are available in the concert goer Patreon stream. And then like the big thing with the live concerts online is you don't want to play all your IDs on Twitch, because people will record them and chop your IDs out and put them up. And like, let's say you haven't released that track yet, and some random kid chops it out of your set and puts it up on their YouTube. Then when you release the track, you're going to be getting a takedown notice because it's already been released on their YouTube. And then you're getting takedown notices for your tracks as soon as you release them. And you got to go head to head with some kid who's recorded your shit off of your broadcast. I know lots of people that's happened to, like Ben Jordan, our good friend Ben Jordan, the Flashbulb. He had these people, they like basically took his EP down right away, made a couple minor changes to it, like basically just used it as an instrumental for some horrible vocals that they added. And then he was getting takedown notices for his own music. And he on like all the websites, and he had this big protracted legal battle that he was like so disheartened. Like he was like, I'm about to quit music from this. This is terrible, right? So I don't want to play my IDs on these public live streams, but I know that if someone signed up for that concert goer tier, they're there because they're my patron. They're there because they want to support me. They want to support my family through the crisis. They want to support my art. I know I could trust that person not to steal my IDs and leak them. So these private concerts, I'm playing shit that I would never play publicly, you know?
Yeah, that's wicked. Didn't something like that happen to Lauren recently, and he went on a huge Twitter rant? I really hope more people follow what's going on with him, because basically he was like, this is fucking bullshit. I'm done with this.
I want to make or whatever, right?
Yeah. He's like, I want to make we got to get like some lawyers together to and start making basically a union for all of us musicians, so that we can fight bullshit like this, because it's really, really bad and stupid.
And all it takes is one person to ruin it for everyone. You know, it's really unfortunate. Like I've had people, you know, like I used to do live streams from my studio, like totally publicly, where I would be writing music in my studio and people could just watch and be a fly on the wall and watch me do it. And people started cutting my unfinished tracks out and hosting them on their YouTubes. And then this kid, I was super, super upset about it. It was actually that same ill-fated Virtual Riot collab, but this kid had cut the track out and put it up on his YouTube when it wasn't even done. It was like not even halfway done. So I go over to the kid's YouTube and I'm so mad. And I go read his bio and he's like, oh yeah, I'm like 17 years old and I'm like dying of lupus, and my great joy is watching production live streams, and I always just like to cut the tracks out and put them up on my YouTube so I can compare them to the finished version and people can see how the track develops. I'm like, man, I'm not gonna put this dying 17-year-old on blast. You know, like I can't be like, hey everybody, fuck this YouTube account. Like I'm not like, you can't even be mad. You can't even be mad.
Yeah.
Yeah. I mean that happened with the only time that's ever happened to me was when I was working on the Deadmau5 collab, because obviously every time I worked on it, all the Deadmau5 fans would come and watch the stream, and they all would like that track, because I worked on it on stream, got cut and uploaded so many fucking times before it was finished.
It's so annoying.
Crazy.
Like, it's so annoying. Yeah,
Usually I don't have that issue, and I like to think that I'm in like sort of the Goldilocks zone where I can make a living off music, but I don't have a bunch of fucking idiots like trying to steal my shit. It's like a good middle ground to be in, I feel like.
It gets weird sometimes. Like I was auto hosting on Twitch. I was going through auto hosting because I'm doing this this Twitch live stream music event on Saturday from 6 to 8. I'm doing a label showcase on my Ill.Gates Music Twitch. So I was going through and doing auto hosting exchange with a lot of my music friends. And I went to go try and auto host Virtual Riot. And there's like 30 different various misspelled official Virtual Riot Twitch accounts where it's like official with like 2 A's before the L, Virtual Riot, official Virtual Riot, OOT, official. And I'm just like, which one of these even is? And I was like, I couldn't even find his real account. There's so many fake accounts.
That's rough.
Ridiculous.
The whole system has been kind of wild. I mean, how much are the three of you on Twitch these days? Because I know that like Bill's been streaming a lot more lately, especially since he got the new computer. Woulg has been streaming like 2 or 3 times a week now, which has been super fun. And then
I stream every week, but it's all inside of my producer dojo educational environment because I just don't want my unfinished tracks getting leaked. And I don't want people who are just there because it's free feeling entitled to record it and cut it up and upload it to their accounts. And I know that the people who are in the producer dojo that are learning from me, that are coming to my class every week, I know they're not going to fuck me over like that. So I just keep it, I'll do live streams when I'm like doing a music showcase, like on Saturday, but I've been doing all of my live streams in the dojo. And I mean, the response has been really cool, and the community, it's just like having that filter of like, do these people actually support you or not? Having that filter enables me to trust people at a level that I would not trust them with just joke you public with a free stream. So that solution has been working really well for me, but sadly at the cost of no more public live streams from the studio.
I have kind of what platform do you use to stream just to people that you allow?
So the website, the Producer Dojo community, is run on a platform called Kajabi, Kajabi, and Kajabi is like a kind of educational institution. It's kind of like WordPress or whatever. It's like a framework.
It's like an all-in-one like course selling browser-based software.
Okay. Yeah, so I use Kajabi.
It's like e-commerce shit.
Yeah, and then I stream to Vimeo, and then there's like a Vimeo embed inside of Kajabi that is only viewable from Kajabi, so that the members have to be logged into their member account and then view it.
Yeah, cool. That's interesting. Yeah, I've been thinking about how I want to, because I don't actually have a Patreon. I've been thinking about how I want to structure it and what things.
I'll be your patron.
Yeah, cool. Yeah, I've been thinking about like what kind of stuff I'd like to structure, or how I'd like to structure it, what stuff I'd like to offer, and because like I really like giving stuff away for free. Like I kind of make an effort to like that. Almost everything that I put out, there is a place where you can find those things for free. Like I always upload it somewhere where if somebody looks really hard, they can find it for free. Because I don't want money to be, especially for my devices and shit, I don't want money to be a barrier to like, learning new tricks and trying out stuff. But I want it to be like enough of a pain in the ass that if you're lazy, then you'd rather just pay for it,
Yeah.
And I like to set stuff up in that sort of way, but at the same time, I do think that would make my life a lot easier if I just kind of, was like, okay, now now maybe it's just has to do with putting a delay of like stuff comes out earlier to your patrons, and then afterwards it can be for everybody or something like that. But
Yeah, I do that too.
that's cool. I've been thinking about that a lot. I really like that idea, and I really like the potential for like having a place to stream just for the the hardcore fans and doing extra.
I really recommend you do it because like when you're selling like a sound pack or something like that, it's like a very it's a transactional relationship where it's like this person is giving you X amount of dollars and you're giving them like Y object of value in return, right? But the relationships that you build on Patreon, it's a relationship of patronage. They're paying not for a specific product or service. They're paying because they want to support you and your art because they believe in you and they want more of everything, please. That's and then cool. The stuff that you give them because you're like, hey, thank you. Here's some cool stuff for you, and that paradigm, it just completely changes the relationship, and the relationships that you build through Patreon are so much, they're really fulfilling relationships. Like you find the people who are your real true fans who really believe in you and really want to support you. And, I find that I can be so open with the people on Patreon in a way that I just can't with the general public. And that website changed my life. Like the whole producer dojo basically started as a Patreon project, and then eventually it outgrew Patreon. So I had to kind of like take my educational Patreon down, create the dojo, and then now I've rebooted my Patreon as like my Ill.Gates the Artist Patreon. But it's really like, even just since I started like a week and a half ago, all these cool new people have come into my life, and like I'm having all these conversations inside the Patreon environment with the people who are like really moved by my music, the people who like it really counts for them, and you can really get to know the people who listen to your music. You can really get to know what they like about it, what emotional needs you're helping them with, and what purpose your music serves in their life. And I think you're going to be better informed as an artist. You're going to be better able to serve your audience. You're going to connect with your audience at a better level, and you're really going to find your real community beyond just that transactional relationship that you get in a kind of traditional marketplace environment.
That's really, thank you. That's like exactly the pep talk I needed. I think I'm gonna set it up after.
Get in there, dog. I'll be your patron.
Man. I'd patron to you as well, man. Yeah, the hardest thing I find with setting up a Patreon, because I'm trying to do one right now for the Mr. Bill podcast, right? Because I have like this podcast editor who's edited like fucking 35 podcasts now for me just for free, and I want to start giving him money. So trying to get some income going there. And the hardest thing I've found about setting up Patreon is figuring out the rewards for the tiers.
You can change them.
Right, I know you can change them, but for sure. But that's the like upon the launch of the thing, right? Like it's really difficult to be like, okay, if $1 gets this, and then $2 gets this, and $5 gets this, and $10 gets this, then what does $20 get? And like, what else of value can I add for a $50 tier? And like, should I add some ridiculous like $10,000 tier? And like,
I have a $1,000 tier. A few people have taken me up on the $1,000 tier.
Yeah, I know. I've seen a lot of.
Yeah, dude, I mean, they only do it for a month or whatever, but they'll do it for a month, and then I'll be like, okay, what do you want? And then,
what do you give people for $1,000?
There's one person that came over to my house for a weekend. And we just like hung out, and they sat in on me making a track in the studio. We hung out. Wow. That has since grown into the dojo. Like I have a warehouse here with 5 different recording studios that are also guest rooms, and people will pay to come stay here for a week, and I train them and give them different exercises, and they have their own little studio and stuff. But that grew out of just me putting this $1,000 tier up and being like, okay, you've paid $1,000. What do you want? Let's figure out what's worth it to you. And then I would have a conversation with that person, and then figure out what sorts of things they would be excited about. But that turned into kind of like this Airbnb for DJs business, where basically now I have this giant warehouse full of recording studios, and people come here and train, and it's awesome.
That's wicked. That's so wicked.
Yeah, it's a really cool place. I've stayed there like a few times now. It's fucking awesome. It's basically like as Dylan's explaining, the way it's like the studio he's in is like the big master studio, but then there's like shitloads of lofts and stuff like that, which are all like mini studios. It's really cool.
That's wicked. Where are you based, Dylan?
I'm in downtown LA with all the homeless camps and pits of garbage.
Oh, hell yeah.
Yes.
But it's magic here. But you never know from the outside. You look around, it just looks like there's like a truck shop and a tire place and an abandoned building next door. It's like not a residential neighborhood at all. But anything is possible here. It's the magical land where all of the artists and Burning Man people go and build their dreams.
That's cool.
Literally, my brain is just going to like, oh, that'd be a great place to brew beer.
Yeah, you could. Well, I can't have people over now, so I'm trying to figure out alternate ways to keep the ship afloat. So maybe it'll be a brewery.
Dude, yeah, start a brewery. No, not even a micro. Start a full fucking commercial brewery.
Shit.
Yeah, I mean, we got the space for it.
You honestly do have the space to start a microbrewery, I think. Like, you would need to obviously get like giant fermentation vats and shit, but yeah, you could do it.
Man, so I see this Mussar like image here, and it really looks to me like the fan blades are like kind of like a beanie, and I like to imagine that you're like flying from your head, that you've got no pants on, and you're just flying.
There you go. I'm just making sure they can see what's going on, because that's the side view. Right
yeah,
there.
it totally looks like you're flying with your head propeller.
Gotta spin away. I actually kind of want to provide a bit of a counterpoint or a devil's advocate for Patreon versus like putting things on for free, because like I have a Patreon and I stream on Twitch 5 days a week. I pretty much treat it like my job, and I've gotten way more success on Twitch just sort of saying like, look, if you like the content, if you want something that allows me to continue to provide this content, consider, giving me $5 a month and maybe donating if you're feeling like it. Like, I never ask for donations. I never ask for subscribers. Well, I do sometimes ask for subscribers, which if you're liking this content, at the very least, I would like it if you would drop a follow on this channel. If you want to drop a sub, that'd be awesome, but you're not obligated to right now. But
what's your Twitch?
Huh?
What's your Twitch? I'll auto-host you.
Everything is Mussar Music. All my content, all my branding is all the same. All one word, Mussar Music. 2 S's.
All right, you are on my auto-host list.
Awesome. Well, appreciate that. But with this experience, like, I have some benefits for subscribers. I give subscribers special things. They get priority in feedback streams. I give them free samples and free presets. But the whole idea is I want to provide free education. That was my whole reason for getting on Twitch, is I want to fill the gap that I saw in educational content on the internet for like music theory specifically focused stuff that blends in with electronic music, that blends in with mixing, trying to bridge that gap and bring all of this knowledge to as democratic a format as possible. It's one of the reasons why I call this a Roundtable podcast, because it's not my show. I don't give a shit about me. I am glad that all 3 of you have been talking for the majority of this time, because that means hopefully I'm doing my job right. So I feel really grateful for the ability to have free education and free content and not have to worry about like, oh, well, does this person care about me or not? Does this person value my content? I'm doing something that I value, and people have chosen to support me in spite of the fact that it's free. And I feel really kind of privileged to have that position, and I think that, Patreon's great. And like I said, I do have a Patreon, patreon.com/Mussar Music. I have to rework all the goals and make sure that it is not what it is right now. The goals are not correct right now. I need to get rid of the lessons because that does not work out. But I find a little bit more, freedom almost. In the same way that you find freedom in Patreon. But I don't know.
Luckily the electronic music community is like fucking really supportive and nice, because there's a lot of communities that just aren't. Like, for instance, woulg, have you ever used Stack Overflow?
Yeah, I am familiar with Stack Overflow.
Yeah, it's literally just like fucking code bros who were just like they're like super pretentious, right? And I actually, talking about brewing again, the home brewing community is like even worse than that. It's like Stack Overflow if everyone was drunk. So like, so luckily, I mean, you know, you've got the electronic music community behind you, which is fucking awesome because it seems like everyone's generally supportive. And I really enjoy, yeah, the fact that you can give away like free shit and people will sort of like pay for you to kind of keep making that possible and make that your job because they appreciate it so much and it brings them a lot of value and stuff. Seems like it's almost, yeah, the music industry's kind of always been like that though, right? It's always been a lot of like pro bono work to sort of just like position yourself better in the industry and shit like that.
True, yeah.
Yeah, so you got a new patron.
Thank you so much.
Yeah, get on it. Reboot your Patreon, man.
Oh,
You just got a new patron.
Patreon.
But yeah, I think it is important to do free stuff, for sure. And I always do a lot of free stuff, because I know what it's like to be broke too. I was a starving artist for many, many years, and I think it is definitely important to do free stuff. But it's like, I think the real pitfall to avoid is just doing one thing, because like the panda
100%
is going extinct because all it can eat is bamboo and they can't make enough fat to make milk for their babies and they don't want to fuck each other and stuff. They're going extinct. But a close relative of the panda that is thriving is the trash panda, the raccoon. They eat everything. They're doing just fine. So I think the real lesson here is to diversify, just like Wu-Tang Financial told us in that famous David Chappelle sketch. Diversify,
Also doing a lot of free shit, it kind of just gives you good experience, right? Like as I was talking about before, I've been getting into video editing, and as to get better at it, I've just been like asking people for projects to do just because like I want to do more of it quicker, right? Like if I just did my own projects, I wouldn't be doing so much, I'd be doing some video editing like maybe once a month or something like that. So I feel like doing free shit is good for that too, because it just gives you a lot more to do and you just build up your skill set a lot quicker. Like I don't know if you did this with Max Woolg, but like for instance when Tom Cosm started doing Max stuff, he literally was just posting on his Facebook constantly about like, hey, is there anything you want Ableton to do, because I'm trying to learn Max, give me projects, and he was just making Max devices for people for free for like a year. And it was like the golden era. If you wanted anything done, you would just ask Tom and he would just do it. Apparently.
I love that, man.
I did that with Pure Data when I was in college. I actually with Pure Data and processing. And I actually, my friend, one of my friends, I like made her whole grad show piece. Basically, she just like told me what to do, and then she won some prize for it or something.
Nice.
But yeah, I had this rule in college where I was like, if you want help programming stuff, you can call me at any time. You just have to bring over like a sandwich or a piece of food and I'll do anything. And I learned a shitload from doing that.
That's awesome.
Yeah. Doing stuff that's my thing is like whenever any of my like business stuff goes slow or I'm low on money, the first thing I do is pick up a shitload of free projects. Like I just start saying yes to everything. And then from one of those, something will come and I'll float by the seat of my pants as usual.
Dude, imagine if the coding scene was as sensationalized as music and you just had people like called Code Nectar and like Codex and shit, and like they had like logos and
I heard a couple of stuff like that because I mentioned before I was learning like some programming language. It's called Chuck. It's like an audio programming language. It's kind of like a really janky version of JavaScript. Really janky.
One of my professors in university, he wrote the manual for Chuck.
Oh, that's sick.
Yeah, I have never used it because I tried it a little bit and I was like, fuck this.
It is. I mean, it's good for learning programming, especially if you have like an audio background, because the way that everything kind of works, it's very intuitive. So like it's actually taught me a lot of programming concepts, and it's also taught me a lot of patience in terms of dealing with an interface that is just god awful. But I guess the point I was getting to with that was it really made me appreciate how much being uncomfortable with a new experience is for learning. And I guess the question or the conversation I'm trying to go towards is like, how important is that to your process, or kind of how you're, dealing with life, or you're dealing with situation? Like what sort of impact does that kind of stuff have on your being or whatever? I don't know.
So are you talking about doing free stuff, or are you talking about doing things that make you uncomfortable?
Well, I guess it's a little bit of both, because for me, doing free stuff sometimes can make me feel uncomfortable, because I have been kind of exploited in the past. People have definitely taken advantage of my charity and pushed me into really, really either emotionally or sometimes physically unhealthy places. And, it's a tough thing. And as someone who is advocating for basically giving your shit out for free on Twitch, like, I do it because it makes me uncomfortable. You know what I mean?
Dude, speaking about Ben Jordan again, I know he came up earlier. He was actually telling me yesterday that MMA, because he's an MMA fighter.
I didn't know that about him. That's awesome.
Yeah, dude, he's been doing MMA for.
That guy is such a maniac. He's like,
he honestly
so
is,
good at everything. I love him.
Yeah, it's crazy. So he has what's it called? Low latent input. I don't know. He has like something where like he just can't, if he doesn't have the ability to ignore like facts and shit. He just has to like know everything about everything. And if he says if he was actually a smart person, he'd be like a genius, but he's not. So he's just this like dude who just knows a shitload of stuff, which I disagree with. I think he's a genius. But anyway,
I think we can all agree on he's a genius.
Yeah, but anyway, he was telling me how he does MMA, and he was like, because that's something that makes you so uncomfortable, right? Like being choked out by somebody else is like the least comfortable thing. He's like, once you've had that happen to you at 10 a.m. in the morning, it's pretty hard to be anxious at 4 p.m. when your friend asks you to come have dinner with them or something. It's like the comparison is like not, it's not really comparable. So he said that was like a huge helper for him in terms of anxiety, is like putting himself in these extremely uncomfortable positions, because then in contrast, the rest of life seemed really easy.
That's so interesting.
Yeah, I mean, from as far as doing free stuff is concerned, I think like, if you're going to have the kind of perseverance that it takes to do any kind of self-driven craft, whether it's music or pursuing martial arts or any of these other intrinsically motivated activities, it has to be something that you would do for free. Because if you're counting the hours and you're dipping your toe into the pool and being like, is this worth it or not? And the rational mind kicks in and you start becoming a bean counter, and you're like weighing the pros and cons, and you're like, you know what, fuck it, I'll stick to punching a clock or whatever, and you end up giving up on whatever that thing is. So I think if you are going to pursue music or skateboarding or whatever the fuck it is, it's got to be something that you would do for free, because it's who you are. And so I think that's like a prerequisite, right? And then I think that as far as being uncomfortable is concerned, it is very important to get comfortable making yourself uncomfortable, and to deferred gratification and the ability to sustain struggle is really, that's, like in our Western culture, we have this idea of, like, in our educational institutions, for example, they have this idea of being gifted as a genetic property. And they do this testing where they're trying to isolate out which subset of the population has the genetic, has been, and even just the idea of being gifted. It's like a genetic gift that makes you inherently better and special, and therefore you get the better education and you're streamed out of the class of, people who are going to go work at Walmart or whatever, right? But in Asian cultures, they don't have this idea of being gifted. And the students that they are going to invest the extra effort and the extra resources in are not necessarily the most genetically predisposed to intelligence or whatever. They measure the value of these people based on their ability to sustain struggle and persevere in the face of discomfort. And if there is a less intelligent student who's able to get up there in front of the class and fail at a thing until they finish it properly, they're like, hey, that's the person that we need to invest our time in, not the person who is handed the royal flush hand genetically and sits around on their ass being entitled and thinking they're the best all day. That person's going to be a fucking headache in a real work situation. That person's going to be a pain in the ass. They're going to think that they're better than you. They're going to think that they, you know, shouldn't follow orders. They're going to feel like they want shit just handed to them. That person's going to be annoying in a real world environment. But the person who's maybe not as intelligent, who's willing to sustain discomfort and sustain struggle and persevere to the completion of the objective, that's the person you want on your team.
Totally. Yeah, when a lot of people who hit me up and they go like, man, how are you like so knowledgeable at like Ableton or whatever, my answer is always that I just have like dumb level persistence with it. Like like at the point where like people would just be like, oh fuck this is boring, or this is like, you know, annoying me or whatever. It's like I'll just smoke more weed about it and keep doing it or something. Or like get drunk and keep doing it, or like just do something else to like tell my fucking brain to shut up and like just keep doing the thing.
Yeah, well, it's like one of the fun things about prodigies is with only rare exceptions, at some point they just become everyone else. Like that just trends into the mean. It becomes part of the average. Like gifted kids, more often than not, just become normal adults.
Well, we got to stop treating it as a race.
Absolutely.
I think that's the problem, because like even IQ, you know, when they're designing the IQs to scale, it's a measure of how quickly the child is developing relative to the center of the bell curve. And, you know, when you just reward the people who are able to make quick progress, you're not rewarding the people who are going to go the furthest. You know, it's like slow and steady wins the race. Did you miss that Aesop? You know, like that's part of Western culture. We're sleeping on Aesop.
True. Yeah, no, I totally agree. Like I think that yeah, learning shit is definitely a grind. There's definitely people who learn shit faster, but everyone learns different shit at different speeds, right? Like for instance, a good example is like Yarn, right? If she just looks at like any sort of coding problem, she's just instantly like she skim reads a whole page and then she's like, oh, I understand fucking machine learning now, and like then starts feeding stems to a thing. Like she's just really good at that kind of stuff, right? But when it comes to like video editing, like Resolve, linear editing software, that's something where we were doing that together the other night, and I was learning that a shitload faster than her, right? Because like I've just got way more experience with linear editing software, and I think like different people just gravitate towards different shit and whatnot. You know what? Like for instance, learning the rules to like a sport, like something I'm terrible at, or learning the rules to a board game is something I'm terrible at. It takes me like an hour to learn the rules of Set the other day, but like, you know, some other person like Jesty from Circuit Bent, he literally skim reads the board game manual once and then is like a fucking dungeon master, you know? So yeah, I think like, you know, different people are definitely sort of, you know, wired to learn different shit differently. You know, certain people just have a natural inclination for knowing what works good in cooking, whereas like for me, I'm like, why the fuck doesn't this taste right? And they're like, because you didn't put any of the OTT of cooking in, salt.
The OTT of cooking.
That MSG. But no, I mean, that's totally true though. Like I always say it's not that people can't learn things. Anyone can learn anything, but some things you have to work harder for, and if you don't have the motivation to put in that extra work, you're never gonna get there.
Yeah, that's what I'm saying. Is it's like, you know, for me to sit down and learn Resolve might take me a day, right? But for somebody else, especially if they've never used any other linear editing software, and especially if their brain is geared towards other shit like, you know, sports or cooking or something like that, it might take them weeks or months, you know, whereas it might take somebody like me a day or two. Or, you know, same with coding, right? Like for somebody like woulg, it seems like he was able to pick up programming pretty quickly. But for someone like me, it's something I've been chipping away at for literally 5 years or more, and it's like still something that doesn't make sense to me completely. In actually, the word is not completely. The word is almost at all. saying like I don't understand it completely like insinuates that I understand like a fair bit.
I recognize that word is basically the level we're at.
Right.
There's so many things like that. Honestly, actually, with regular life skills, I have such fucking issues. Like, it took me such a long time to be like, wait, okay, so laundry. Okay, so wait, how do you like how to work the fucking laundry machine? I mean, this was a long time ago, but
totally.
And like all sorts of little like taxes still, like I'm like, okay, I think I get the basic process now of like how you stay on top of this, how you keep your tabs on your shit, but stuff like that is so hard for me, and it's so hard to like figure out how to do it. And yeah, I actually recently found this YouTube channel that's called Dad How Do I.
Yes,
I saw that on Reddit the other day. It made the rounds.
yeah. And I think I'm gonna be watching that shit a lot because that's like a lot of the stuff I don't know how to do.
Amazing.
All right, so go ahead.
I was gonna say like with taxes, right? It's something that also I'm just an idiot with. Like I look at it and it gives me anxiety. But somebody like Gardner, for instance, will just make a fucking blast furnace of a spreadsheet, and you just throw like a few numbers in it. It just figures it all out for you.
That's so.
Some people just have different levels of patience too, right? Like one thing I've noticed, and somebody who's really good at this is someone like KJ Sawker. He's just so good at like sitting down and just like no matter what the task is, just being like, I'm just going to chip away at it and like figure it out eventually. And he's just really like driven on like he's very persistent, right? And I find that's the kind of shit that I sometimes lack as well, is that like if I look at something and it frustrates me or I don't instantly get it, I'm like, fuck, this is too hard, and I'll just like go and do something else.
Yeah, but at the same time,
I'm so bad for that.
Like that's
I think everyone is to some degree, but I think what Dylan was sort of talking about in the first place is, in other cultures, they will never see somebody as being gifted. They will look for the person who has that kind of persistence, right? Like the person who is willing to actually be good at that. And I think that's a great skill to build, and it's something that I always am aware of with myself and trying to fix, because I think it's like a weakness, right, to look at a problem and just get instantly defeated by it and be like, it's too hard for me, couldn't possibly do this or whatever.
Well, what is the question that I kind of wanted to ask to the group is, what is like one thing that you've always wanted to learn, like, but it's always been on like the other side of that mountain? What's your Sisyphean boulder?
Well, I think I'm doing a lot of them right now, like in quarantine, and that's why I've been looking at it as a positive thing. Like reading books was always a thing. I was like, I would try and read a page. My reading comprehension is terrible, so I'd have to read the page like 20 times before the information sunk in. But through quarantine, I've been like, I have the time to read the page 20 times. So now I've been doing that more and more, and my reading comprehension's been getting better. And now I'm like
That's awesome. I'm proud of you, Brill.
Thanks.
Job.
Yeah, I'm 3/4 of the way through a book, but it's like taken me like fucking 2 weeks.
What's the book?
To do that? It's called Throwing Rocks at the Google Bus. It's about how when Google was using the bus stops in San Francisco to take all of their employees to work, it raised the prices of housing around those bus stops, and then San Francisco residents got pissed off and started throwing rocks at the Google buses.
Hell yeah.
That's what it's supposed to be about. But as I kept reading it, I realized I'm just reading a fucking book about economics. Like literally this dude is just talking about like growth traps and like the old bazaar markets in the old times in Europe, and like trading value versus trading your hours and becoming an employee in capitalist societies and shit. It's really not about the bus anymore at all.
That's how all
it's like
good books go, in my opinion. I don't know.
Kind of, yeah. And so that was one of my Sisyphean boulders for sure. Another one is programming, which I've been slowly dabbling in. Another one is learning more about my modular setup. I find I'm like pretty bad at buying a module, learning like the very surface level functions of it, and then being like, I can't be fucked learning all the menu diving shit, and then just like moving on to another one. So getting more into that for sure. Yeah, I mean, kind of all the shit I've just already mentioned.
Who wants to go next?
I mean, for me, it's making videos for all of my songs. It's been incredibly time consuming, but I've crossed a lot of them off the list.
But was that a Sisyphean boulder? Because it's something that, like you already mentioned, was only something that became relevant again since having to stay inside all the time, right? because you were like, now I can do the set in this way because I'm at my house now.
Yeah,
like, was it
I mean,
really,
I guess
like-
it just feels like a Sisyphean boulder because of how fucking long it takes to do video editing.
Right, but it was not something that you wanted to do before this whole COVID thing, right?
Yeah, I suppose. Yeah.
Yeah.
Okay. I retract my answer.
Debate 1.
How about you, Vogue? What's your boulder?
I think so. Actually, one of them was the one recent kind of smaller boulder was like the AI stuff. Like I had to really like. There's quite a bit of the programming stuff that like I'll run into the same problem again and again, and I'll bash my head against it, and then I'll eventually just be like, you know what, fuck it, and I'll try to figure out a workaround. But then it keeps coming back, and I'm like, fuck, there's that thing again that I have to learn. There's been some stuff about like Fourier transforms that I still don't understand, and I'm finally like at this point where I'm like, fuck it, I'm gonna try to write my own implementation of a fast Fourier transform. So that I understand all the ins and outs and stuff. Music theory was kind of like that also. I was always like, no, I'm not going to learn it. And then eventually I was like, fuck it. I just want to fucking know this shit. I'm tired of not knowing this. And actually, I was surprised at how well this worked for me. But I just, because I was so unproductive during that time. I was like really, I don't know, I was going through some depressive episode or something, but so all I did all day was just like watch fucking YouTube videos about music theory and then like try little things on my guitar. Cause at that time I like couldn't, I was like, every time I'd sit down in the studio, I'd just be like, no, fuck this. I hate this. And I'd have to leave. So that was kind of a primo time to like learn all the music theory stuff. Cause I was just trying it out on my guitar and stuff like that. And I was just sitting, there's this really nice, like in my kitchen, there's a door with a little window in it, and I just put my favorite chair in there, and then I would just sit there with my laptop and sit there and smoke cigarettes all day. And so that was one of them for sure. There's my biggest one probably, which I still like come back to. I've since like tried to convince myself not to do this a million times. I've kind of come at it a different ways, but like Rob Clouth's album List of Lists, there's still so many techniques in there that I'm like, fucking how does he do that shit? And he's like explained it to me in person a bunch of times, and I've been like, okay, still don't really understand how you do this. But that's one that I always, and there was a couple of years there where I would get trapped in that, and it made me like not really want to make music as much. And I did the same thing with guitar, actually. I like got it into all this like virtuosic guitar playing, and then I would kind of beat myself up over not being able to play like that. And I kind of learned a big lesson from that of like, don't like to just be gentle with yourself and take care not to drive yourself crazy with that shit. And
yeah, dude, self-patience is like a huge thing here.
It's so hard, but it's like one of the most important skills, I think.
Yeah.
But yeah, so there's that, and it like that's one of the ones that I'm really grateful for, because it's like that the inspiration that I got from that kind of that one album basically has driven so many of like the max patches that I wrote, like so many of the songs that I've written, so many of the production techniques and sound design techniques that I've come up with or tried to imitate what he was doing just by listening and trying to figure it out. And it's great. It's like helped keep a steady course for me for the past like 10 years or whatever. I can't remember how long ago that was that came out, but anyways, I was following him on MySpace when he first started like putting that stuff up on MySpace.
That's so crazy that one album like generated like a lifetime's worth of tasks for you.
Yeah, I know. That's so. It always like fucks with my head, because I'm like, I feel kind of lame that in this way I'm sort of living in his shadow. But I think like there's something about the fact that he made that album and he just sort of like he was like, okay, well I did that, now I'm gonna go do something else. And I was like, I remember when I heard that, I was like, no, I want to make like a whole genre out of this. I want to convert a bunch of other people. I want to hear more of, I mean, it was all following the feeling of like, I want more of this album. And I think that was like kind of a nice, like symbiotic relationship where he came up with this cool sound, and then I saw that and I was like, okay, let's try to convince a bunch of other people to do that too. And the easiest way to convince a bunch of other people to do it was like to do it myself and like kind of show the way, you know?
Right.
But yeah,
That's
I don't know.
Like
it still feels
perfect
weird. Like
boulder, though. That's like literally like that's the perfect Sisyphean boulder if you think about it.
yeah, exactly.
Right. Yeah, it's like a huge task.
Yeah.
What was just to like make sure I'm thinking about this properly, Sisyphus was the guy who got banished to push the boulder up the hill, and then some other philosopher like hundreds of years later was like, no, we have to imagine Sisyphus as being happy, and we're all just Sisyphus pushing a boulder up a hill or whatever.
I think that was that Nietzsche that said that he was happy?
Nietzsche was pretty into Sisyphus.
Or was it
Camus, I think it was.
Yeah, Camus, yeah.
Yeah, well, that's my Sisyphean boulder is philosophy, because I that's all over my head. I try, but I can never follow any of that shit.
Yeah,
I love that shit.
You got to get into Taoism, man. Taoist philosophy is the best. Like Zhuangzi, you know, like the butterfly. Like, okay, so this is amazing, like Taoist story that I just love so much, and I think it's really important for these times. So Taoist philosophy is much more about explaining things in terms of like an image or a metaphor, and less in terms of like, okay, well, if we're going to talk about the nature of consciousness and being, we have to first discuss what the word is means, and then there'll be like this like lengthy discussion of like nailing down all these specific terms. Like that's the Western approach to philosophy, and that's probably why you're struggling with some of the reading. Is like a lot of it is just this, especially the Germans, they're like really specific and dense and terse and stuff. Whereas Taoist philosophy is like, it's a joy to read. It's easy. You can understand it right away. And it's all metaphor and image. And it's just like, you have a good belly laugh and you get less dumb, you know? So one of my favorite Taoist stories is about the farmer who lost his horse. And one day there's this farmer and he lost his horse. His horse ran away, and the neighbors all come over and they're like, oh man, you've lost your horse. This is the worst thing that's ever happened. How are you going to run your farm? And he's like, who knows what's good or bad? You know, and then the next week, the horse comes back, and it's got a flock of wild horses that have followed it back. And now he's got a flock of horses at his farm. And the neighbors come by, and they're like, oh, man, this is great. You've got a whole herd of horses now. You're stoked. And he's like, who knows what's good or bad? And then the week after that, his son is trying to break one of the stallions, and he gets thrown off the horse, and he breaks his leg, and now he can't work on the farm. And all the neighbors come by, and they're like, oh, this is terrible. How are you going to work at your farm? You're old. Your eldest son's got a broken leg. This is a tragedy. And he's like, who knows what's good or bad? And then the next week, war breaks out, and the army comes by, and they're recruiting for the army, and they're taking all of the able-bodied young men in the village, but his son has a broken leg, so he gets to stay home and not go to war and get slaughtered. And you can just kind of keep telling the story and making up situations that keep flipping whether it's a good or bad thing, and have the farmer keep shrugging forever. And it's really just like, it's great. It's so easy to understand. It's so fun. You can tell the story drunk and not fuck it up. And it's great.
It's like the Aristocrats, but actually like has a moral.
Yeah, it's
right. Seems like the whole crux of the story is that we just can't access other pieces of time, and therefore our very limited information doesn't give us like a good enough standpoint to really judge anything.
Bingo. Easy.
Right.
I mean, I also look at it in terms of the broader kind of thing that we've been talking about, which for a lot of these conversations, it revolves around context, right? Like when we're talking about, you know, whether something is good or bad, when we're talking about what is a Sisyphean boulder for us, and we're talking about like how we're dealing with the situation, how we're writing our music, how we're handling like different music festivals, either online or in real life. Like what's important in these is the context that surrounds them, right? Like it's where these things are like existing, kind of like what Bill was saying. Like we only have access to this moment in time. The past is gone as soon as it happens. And if we forget kind of that relationship. I feel like it's easy to, I don't know, maybe lose sight of whatever you're focusing on, and lose sight of, you know, what's important. And like, it's just to kind of come full circle again, like it really does change from moment to moment how that context applies. So I think it's a really good story.
Well, I think like in that moment, you know, we all have, like, we can't know the future, but we can choose to our emotions, you know, and like fear and love are the two like main kind of guiding forces in our life, and we can operate from a calculating place of fear where we can presuppose that we're able to calculate all of these different outcomes and be strategic or whatever, or you can choose to be motivated by love and like take a leap of faith and really just have some trust in the future, have some trust in yourself, have some trust in the people around you. And you know, you can make that choice between fear and love, you know. And like, and I think anger is a choice too. You know, a lot of people, they see anger as something that just like, you know, things happen and you they make you angry, but you make you angry, you know. And I think that, you know, we can't control the environment, but we can control how we show up, and we can control our emotional response to it, and we can control what emotions we allow to guide us. And I think that you know, if we focus rather on that aspect and less on trying to predict things, I think that, you know, you make decisions ultimately that are less regrettable decisions, and it leads us to live a better life.
Absolutely.
Right.
Do you want to say something, Bill?
I was just gonna say I should probably go because like been 2 hours and I need to probably make some food and then write.
Oh
some
my
music and
God.
shit.
Yeah, I was gonna
It
say
has
we've
been
hit
2
around the
hours.
2 hour
Time
mark.
flies.
I know, right? This has been a fun one.
Wow, I thought it was like 45 minutes.
So do we want to take a couple of questions from chat, a couple Q&A things, and then start wrapping things up? You think you guys have
Yeah,
like
let
15,
me-
20 minutes?
Yeah, that's fine. Let me get some water and go to the toilet quickly though if we're gonna do that, because that's like
same.
one of my big motivators here for leaving. All right, give me a
Fair
sec.
enough. Yeah, go get your
Yeah, baby.
stuff.
Okay, cool. I'm down to take some questions and stuff. What
Yeah.
do we got? What do we
So
got?
if anyone has any questions in chat, more than welcome to add those. I saw a question a while ago. I'm going to start scrolling back and see if I could find it. Oh, this was a long time ago. So do you think less is more is the way to go for songwriting?
I think so, to an extent. I mean, you can always add and add and add and add, but a lot of the time you end up with crowding the core of your message. Like, really, I think music is about sharing an emotional experience with people. You know, you need to create a place, and you need to have some sort of a sonic character inhabit that space and tell us the story of that sound. You know, there's a dynamic of tension and release and exploration that occurs. And when you keep adding and adding and adding to things, it's often like there's so much noise in the system that it's hard to follow the emotional narrative of the song. And I find that things are not complete when there's nothing left to add. They're complete when there's nothing left to take away.
Absolutely.
All right, I am back.
The question was, do you think less is more is the way to go for songwriting?
I mean, it's just one way of many ways to go about it, right? Like, I mean, there's maximalism, there's minimalism, there's, you know, use of negative space, use of no negative space. Like, I mean, I don't think there's any good way to go about art. I think the biggest thing for me is contrast in art. I think like if you don't contrast stuff in like DJ sets enough, or if you don't contrast stuff in your songs enough, the whole thing just ends up sounding gray and boring and drab and not eventful enough, you know? So for me, it's more a thing of like, I think that's the, regardless of less is more or more is more or whatever, if you have no contrast in either setting, both is like bad songwriting in my opinion. And I think like a lot of really calculated pieces of music, like where people write from too systematic of a standpoint, whether that be theoretically with music theory or theoretically with audio theory. Like, for instance, an example of that is when I got out of university, whenever I would like set the settings on my compressor, every setting would, like every parameter would have to be a round number, right? Like the threshold, I wouldn't be comfortable leaving it at like negative 17.9, and I wouldn't be comfortable leaving the ratio at like 1.02 over fucking 8.8 or whatever. So I'd like set them all to round numbers and shit. And like that kind of stuff I found was like limiting, right? So I found that you want like something that's soft edged against something that's hard edged, and something that's like, very colorful and bright against something that's very faint and dark, and something that's very loud and aggressive against like, I think these are the more important things to think about in songwriting, rather than whether or not there's a lot going on or not a lot going on.
Well, and I think there's a composition, a term that I guess have been forced to create that I call compositional density. And it's basically the number of sounds present in the song at any given point. And I always tell people when I'm working with them and helping them with their songwriting, a lot of the time, people who are maximalists and they want to put all of the ideas in at once, there's a point where there's so much noise in the system and there's so many ideas that complexity almost just grays out and becomes this wash of chaos. And I'm always just like, hey, be dynamic in your compositional density. Break it down to one sound for a bit and then build it back up and then break it back down again. And it's really like, the less is more approach when taken too dogmatically can often lead to a very static compositional density and a lack of dynamism, and I think that it is important to have dynamics in all of these different ways, including the number of sounds in your song. It should change.
Right. And another thing, I guess, like just to sort of talk about your point of compositional density a little bit, is that when you talk about like amount of elements in a song, like let's say the human brain can only differentiate like 3, right? Well, a lot of shit can kind of get rolled from the brain into one. So like, for instance, the best example of this might be snares. Like you might have a snare sample in your song that in Ableton is 8 channels, right? It's like a fundamental, a piece of noise, some tone, some weird crackle, a clap sample. Like it can be like a lot of shit, but your brain's just going to roll that all into one, right? And then going further down the line, your whole drum mix might be 50 channels. There might be a lot of stuff happening, right? But your brain is almost going to roll that into like one layer, like just drums. It's just going to hear that. If you've done your job well, it should hear drums as one thing. And then another thing, like bass, right? Like your brain is generally not going to separate sub and mid basses. It's going to, and however many layers you have there, it's going to like add that into one layer as well. So I think another thing to think about if you're going to think about like less is more or compositional density is how you can like use all of these things to like be very cognizant of the fact that the brain does do that and like rolls shit into layers. Yeah,
the gestalt, as they say in perceptual psychology, the gestalt. Like you look at a bunch of birds, you don't say, oh, there's 37 birds. You say there's a flock of birds because they move together.
So this is something called subitizing. And humans have the ability to subitize only up until like 5 or 6 or something like that. Like if you look at a group of
7 plus or minus 3, that's why phone numbers are 7 digits.
Right, exactly. And apparently the amount that we can subitize is about the same as crows.
Crows are smart.
Yeah, crows are super intelligent.
They can do math. They've been training them to pick up cigarette butts for food in Paris.
I've seen that. Yeah.
Crazy. It's really cool. They're smart.
Yeah, they can do like pretty complicated puzzles too, where they have to like get rocks from one place and put them in another to like put them on a weight and like allow themselves to get fed. Yeah, it's pretty crazy.
Oh yeah,
and they can talk like somebody in the chat said, and they can recognize faces even like years and years after.
Oh yeah, they hold grudges.
Right. They're gonna be writing music soon. They're coming for your job, Bill.
Woulg, I actually want to get you in on this question real quick, if that's all right. The question was, do you think less is more is the way to go for songwriting? I'm really curious to hear your perspective on this.
Yes, definitely less is more. I mean, for me, that's always a question of where like where do you spend your energy. And I think it's really really important to think about how you're spending your mental energy when you're making a thing. And I think like one of the places where I really feel like less is more is like in mixing and in like it doesn't I think especially with the kind of music that I make, there's this tendency to think that it's like some super complicated system of all sorts of things interlocking. And while it is kind of like that, I only have as much like attention capacity as anybody else, right? Or mental capacity as anybody else. So the way that I do these like super bunch of stuff going on at the same time is by subgrouping stuff and comping stuff down so that I have the same amount of elements to deal with as if I was writing something a lot more simple. So I think like less is more is always, it's not just like a thing to remember, but it's also a thing to like strive for. That like if you have a ton of stuff, it's fucking impossible to keep tabs on it, and it's gonna make a shitty track in the end. So it's important to like cut stuff down and simplify things. And if you have like, you know, a bunch of channels that are doing a similar thing or something, that you can just comp them all down. Or I don't know. I think less is, I really do think less less is more in music. But also it makes me think, if less is more, how much more is more?
Well, I mean, to the point where you get it to white noise, right? Is kind of like the most thing. So I have a question. Speaking of like less is more in mixdowns, did you go through that phase in your early days of producing where you would like cut too much frequency ranges out with EQs and shit like that?
Yeah.
I feel like everyone goes through that phase, right? It's like you think, if I cut that much sub out of all of these elements, and that cleaned up the mix a little bit, then if I cut all the sub out of like everything, then that'll clean the mix up like a ton, right?
Yeah, too much EQ is a rookie move.
Yeah, I fucking did that so much in my earlier music, and now when I listen to it, I'm like, wow, man, there's just like fucking big holes all through the mixdown. It's like you've got to find those perfect cutoff points, and you've got to just tastefully cut out like just enough, just so it's like enough to be clean, but not so much that it's like putting a big trench in a certain frequency range.
I think the thing to strive for is elegance.
Right, taste, right? Like tastefulness.
Well, because an elegant solution is the solution that achieves the desired result with the least amount of steps and the least amount of unnecessary action. And if you strive for elegance in your workflow and elegance in your processing, you'll have a better mix and you'll be a more effective songwriter. And I think that less is more adage that we often see repeated so much is really just nudging us towards elegance in our compositional workflow and elegance in our mixing.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I would agree with that for sure. I think we answered that pretty comprehensively.
Hell yeah. All right, now this question was from M. How do you view your musical trajectory since you started releasing music?
I mean, the trajectory is like the kind of normal trajectory for DJs, right? It's like you start writing music, you suck at it, you get slightly better at it, you start putting it on MySpace or the internet, and then some people listen to it, you get advice from all of your friends about it, you send a lot of shit to labels and whatnot, and they all turn you down. And then you you just keep progressing in that way until eventually like you get your first shows, and then after you get your first shows, you get a little taste of what that's like, keep putting more energy into all the stuff, maybe go get a formal education in music production of some sort, and then, or music theory, whatever you're trying to do, or, just get like educated, and then, just keep practicing it for 12 hours or 6 hours or however many hours a day you can afford to give to it. And then eventually, hopefully, you're doing something that you want to be doing, whether it be like writing music for films or DJing or ghost producing for other people or creating sample packs for Splice, or like just doing what it is that you want to be doing in the music industry. I'm sure like over the years that you've invested and all the advice that you've gotten and the education that you've accrued, you've like slowly honed in this really specified skill. And I think like if you want to talk about like trajectory, you need to talk about all that past shit, right? I think that it just keeps going from there. You just hopefully keep getting more specialized in a certain area and doing more of the shit that you find interesting to do and fulfilling to do.
Oh yeah.
Great answer. Yeah, put me down for that one.
All right.
It looks like it was answered.
I think I feel like my musical trajectory, hold on. It's so fucking hot in this room. My musical trajectory has been like, kind of like I mentioned before, this series of like chasing that Vatex sound, but then also kind of figuring out. It's interesting that I feel like my vision of like what I want my music to sound like has been pretty steady from the beginning, but the way that I go about trying to get that has been different. I always my like kind of end goal for all my music has always been like try to start somewhere semi-normal and bring people onto a ride to get them more into weird shit. And I feel like I haven't really succeeded in that for the most part, but I keep kind of coming at it from different angles and yeah. And I think like, yeah, kind of, we were talking about the less is more thing. Also, I think that my trajectory has also been in like simplifying and refining like the methodology for getting to that place, but also like my vision of what that is.
Yeah, 100%. Nice.
Awesome. That was, man, we're getting some good answers in this podcast. I like this. All right, this one's from FunkMod. Any new workflow tips that you found lately?
It's probably an Ill.Gates question, I would say. He's like the workflow guy.
Yeah, I mean, I don't know about new tips, but I have a video that's 5 workflow tips for music producers that I did for DJ Tech Tools that you should definitely check that out. But I would say like my process, I view it as there's 5 phases, right? There's 3 phases of songwriting and then mix down and mastering. And the 3 phases of songwriting are creating the super loop, which is basically where you have like a loop, maybe it's 1 phrase or 2 phrases, usually 8 to 16 bars, looping over and over again. And you say yes, 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 yes to every idea, muting and unmuting all of your ideas until you find one idea that's your best idea. That's going to be like the face of the track. That's like the main thing that you're like, fuck, those other ideas are good, but this one is awesome. I could listen to that all day.
This is a good concept, the face. That's something like you should touch on more because I feel like that's, yeah.
Okay, so I feel each track should not just be an iteration of your workflow, but it should rather have its own individual personality that has something that makes that particular track unique and describable in some way. And I call that sound the face. So in a bottom-up workflow, you jam until you find the face. But in a top-down workflow, like let's say, the other day I was remixing Time to Get Ill by the Beastie Boys, and I knew that it was going to be a remix of Time to Get Ill. It's the Ill.Gates version of Time to Get Ill. So I knew what the face was. So I let that face be the guiding light that takes me through the second phase. So phase 1 is the super loop. You get a whole bunch of ideas until you get one best idea that is going to serve as the face or the central personality of that track. And then that is the main protagonist. Many of the sounds in your song are setting a stage, but the narrative of tension and release and twists and turns, you're telling the story of the face, right? So that face leads you through the second stage, which is the arrangement, where you would duplicate out the super loop a bunch of times, maybe set some arrangement flags up at the top and be like, okay, this track's going to have a short intro, or maybe I'm just going to get right to it. Don't bore us, start with the chorus, and have the face come right in right away. It depends on the track. The face will tell you what kind of arrangement you need if you just take your ego out of the way and listen. And then that second phase, you would kind of sketch out a rough arrangement, figure out what works, figure out what doesn't work, and get things to the point where, everything feels like the timing is right. And, there might be a couple placeholder sounds in there, but the main sounds are like yours. The main sounds, like the face, should not come from a commercial sound library. The face should be something bespoke to you, something that is from you, whether it's a found sound, like you went digging and you found something that you felt was worthy of putting on a pedestal, or whether you jammed until you found some deep level of your personal aesthetic that you want to share. But that face, that should not be like from a cymatic sound pack or whatever. That face, that central thing, that's got to be something that is bespoke to you, something that is unique to that track.
We talked about this in our podcast. Shouldn't it be something from the cymatic sample pack? There's this limiting belief system that it can't be, right?
And for example, EEPROM's humanoid track,
that's like a default thing from
chip speech, the chip speech, the Plog, chip speech plugin, the humanoid must not escape is the default wording.
Right.
In there.
Or Window Licker by FX Twin. It's like a default patch from Kima.
Yeah, from Kima. Yeah. It's the volume to formant patch, and it's the performs an additive synthesis on the voice. So you definitely should put, but it should be something like that's why I said it could be a found thing, but typically it shouldn't be something that's like an unchanged thing from a commercial library. But it is a valid criticism. You should be aware of limiting beliefs wherever you find them, and thou shalt not use presets. Maybe a limiting belief that's holding you back. Maybe it's stopping you from getting
just a found sample, right? Because it's like it's definitely possible, I think, to just like download the very number one sample on Splice and make like a completely fucking unique tune out of it.
Yeah, it's true. But you should be aware of it, and you should feel good about the face. Have a very clearly defined face. Decide what the face is, and then your arrangement should be based on telling the story of the face as best you can. And then in that second phase, usually all the parts are MIDI and things, and then you get to phase 3. And in phase 3, this is where usually in phase 2, you've kind of maxed out your processor, you've got loads and loads of plugins going, and a lot of the time people will get to phase 2 and they'll be like, hey, I'm having trouble with my computer. It's a real struggle. Every time I make an edit, I got to like check my watch and wait. And then this is where you get to that tracks are never finished, only abandoned. Well, you can be steered into abandoning a track that maybe you could still make better if you are running to the limits of your processor. So I usually complete my tracks in phase 3, which is defined by turning the MIDI tracks into audio stems so that you have maybe 10% of your processor still gets you the same sonic result that you would have at the end of phase 2, but now everything is in these audio stems that you can then, do additional sample-based resynthesis on, or, glitch them out, articulate them, reverse, time stretch, et cetera, because you have your whole processor back again, and then you can remix the stems and edit the stems and everything to get to the point where the track feels a lot more mixed and complete, because you've freed up all these processor resources. So phase 1 is super loop, phase 2 is arrangement, phase 3 is stems and audio editing, phase 4 is final mix, phase 5 is mastering. And that's basically how most people do it.
Well, there you go, man. You don't have anything you want to add?
I just kind of wanted to quickly reiterate what I was saying when I was talking about my my development or whatever, or the trajectory or whatever. I think that's my main workflow tip is like figuring out like I think it's going to be different for every kind of experimental person, but like figuring out what parts it's worthwhile to like comp down and then resample, and which things you want to keep kind of live. But I think being pretty aggressive about that is really helpful. One of the things that I also found is like, don't be afraid of locking stuff down in your productions. Like if you freeze something, like you can always freeze something. And then I think it's actually a really good creative tip of like freeze something and then lock your options down. And then the great thing about that is like later, if you want to change it, then you have to either remake it, which might make something new that's different, or you might have to resample it and fuck with it that way, or you might have to just live with it or something. And I think that those things, and like build the track around that, I think those things actually breed a lot of creativity. So I would really, that's kind of my, it's not really a workflow tip, or no, it is a workflow tip, because it kind of, I find it like speeds things up of like, make those like be aggressive about making those decisions, even if you make mistakes along the way.
I also think the name destructive editing does a big disservice to people, because a lot of people, they fear rendering things down to audio because of its destructive
Same, yeah.
But I think it's a bit of a misnomer, because you can always go back to an earlier version of your project if your versioning saves. And even in Ableton, if you go in the Ableton browser, you can expand the little triangle on a project file, and you can drag in individual channels from an older project and get your frozen tracks back or whatever. So I think when you're thinking of destructive editing, don't think of it as destructive. Think of it as creative.
Yeah.
Oh yeah.
Creative editing.
Exactly.
Yeah.
Do you want to add anything, Bill?
No, I mean, I think that pretty much covered everything I would have thought on workflow stuff.
Cool. Awesome. So I guess last couple questions here. How do you find time balancing between experimentation and like composition, like coming up with ideas versus finishing ideas?
Oh man, I mean, I'm probably a bad person to ask about that because I have like 500 unfinished tracks on various hard drives. But I think like I actually was thinking about this last night and this morning. I think I have to put myself in like whip prison, because like I start too many new things, right? Like every time I stream, I'm like, what should I do today? I'm like, oh, I guess I'll start a new tune on stream. And then I invest like 6 or 7 hours on stream into a thing, be like, oh, this is pretty cool, I'm really feeling it, and then save it into a folder and then just never come back to it.
Yeah.
And then a lot of people like ask me over the years, whatever happened to that tune? And I like completely forget about it, or they'll link me to like a stream on my website, be like, what about this? Like, did you ever do anything with that? And I'm like, actually, I fucking don't even remember making that. And like, so I think what I need to do is, and I was talking to Matt Zoe about this on a podcast a few days ago, about like having kind of like seasons. And I feel like I have these seasons where I start a lot of shit, and then I have this like season of like finishing a lot of shit, and then I have seasons where like, I don't feel like writing music at all. And then he was agreeing with me, saying like, yeah, and sometimes it's a really long winter and then a very short summer and stuff like that, and you just have to sort of be comfortable with the fact that your creative self kind of goes through these movements. But yeah, I think I'm sort of coming into like this season now of like really wanting to finish some stuff and feeling driven to like, actually, I see an album worth of material there that I just need to finish now. So I think what I'm going to do is put myself in what I'm going to call whip prison, meaning I can't start any more whips, and then just limit myself to just working on these like 15 tracks or whatever for the next 4 months or whatever until the shit is finished. So in terms of like, how do I divide my time? Well, I don't think I really divide it that well, but I think I'm like trying to with this new technique of whip prison.
Well, let us know how it goes, because I need that.
Right.
It sounds like some BDSM shit.
Yeah, totally.
Hell yeah.
It's like some basement at some Burning Man camp.
Is there a choke group?
Yeah, totally. Oh yeah, you can have choke groups in drum racks, right?
Yeah, you can have choke
Yeah.
groups. At least
Yeah.
it's leader and follower in Ableton now. They're not like master and
Oh,
slave
yeah.
anymore. That was a bit
saw
like
that.
kind of questionable.
Yeah, I did see that.
Uh,
Apparently, I asked. I didn't ask anyone. I read it on a forum, and like there was a few people who were like, "Yeah, I'm a minority," and that shit was making me uncomfortable. So it's good that they changed it.
Yeah, I think it's good. I think it's good that they changed it. And I think like if we could do away with the term political correctness and just use the term treating people with respect,
Yeah, right. Yeah.
I think people would be like, oh, it's treating people with respect gone mad. I think statements like that would you'd understand how stupid they are. If we just replaced it with treating people with respect.
That's a good point. Yeah.
what about you? How do you find your way between like your creative exploration and your compositional times?
I do daytime and nighttime sessions usually, where like if I'm trying to finish something, I'll start as early as I can because I still might be going at 3 a.m. And my goal is like finish something in that day. And then whenever I have like 2 hours or less, I'll do some more just like exploring or coming up with ideas, making a bunch of parts, saving the clips to the library, doing a bunch of sound design, saving them to the library. It really depends on how much time I have set out. And then, when I'm trying to finish something, I'll get up as early as I can, close off all the inputs, no email, no phone calls, just grind until it's done. Maybe I get it done that day, or maybe I got to do it again the next day. But usually I just try and just grind on as many successive days as I can to finish it while I'm still in the same emotional place that I was trying to express at the outset, But yeah, and then, there are other tracks that I'll peck away at them a couple hours here and there over like a year. And, they all come out differently, but it's important to not. I feel it's important to not have too formulaic a workflow. As much as I'm a big proponent of these formulaic workflows to help people learn to cross the finish line and learn to get out of the weeds. I find that it's like that brilliant Mick Gordon sound design lecture that he did about creating the soundtrack for Doom, and he was like, "You want to change the result? Change your process." Or that book, "The Obstacle is the Way." Like a lot of the time, or Oblique Strategies by Brian Eno. They all operate on the same principle that sometimes the best thing you can do to push yourself to do something different is to throw a big old obstacle in your way, or like throw yourself a curveball, or upend your workflow, or start it differently in some way.
Limitations breed creativity.
Yeah, so it's important to not be too formulaic and too repetitive about these things, and and that also kind of goes back to the concept of the face. It's like try to make sure each track there's something different, there's something special about it, there's something unique about that track, and maybe that could be born of the obstacle, or maybe it could be born of upending your workflow.
Absolutely, with that. What about you, Woulg?
Yeah, I think it's been kind of all over the place the last couple years, but I don't really think too much about like scheduling my time of. I mean, my basic schedule is like I was kind of saying in the chat, like I usually sleep like 3 or 4 till 11 or noon, and then and I usually work from like 1-ish till 9 or noon till 8 or something in those hours, and I don't put a whole lot of intentional thought into like finishing tracks versus starting tracks, but I do have like a whiteboard that I keep with like the tasks that I'm working on and what things I need to check in on, and I'll usually start my fuck yeah, it's so handy, it's so fucking handy. I usually have a thing of sort of like I'll start my day off with like trying to get emails done and check in the server and blah blah blah, just to make sure that I'm not like doing something else when I really should be focusing on something important. But yeah, usually what I'll do is I'll just make a bunch of tracks, and then and the ones that I really like, I'll put into a folder. I have a folder now that's called Possible Woulg, and I just put the.
It sounds like an album title.
Yeah,
or like a philosophy book.
And then in there I have some subfolders of like what for kind of what things fit better with other ones, and then I'll try to make playlists to listen to and see if like this track works with another one or whatever, and then usually I'll go in and kind of like fine tune the tracks at the end and make sort of blends between album to album.
Oh, sorry, I'm just getting a message from Bill. Looks like his internet died. Yeah, sorry.
Bill.
I don't believe it.
Well, it's all right. I guess we can probably just start wrapping things up. We got, I guess, what we'll do is we'll just start shouting out people's stuff, kind of like we started.
MrBillsTunes.com.
Yep.
Go be a member. I'm a member. It's the best.
Yep, go subscribe to Mr. Bill, twitch.tv/MrBillsTunes, MrBillsTunes.com, all that fun stuff.
Yeah, we gotta have his back because the internet didn't.
His internet died, but everyone in the VOD say bye, Mr. Bill. Thank you, Mr. Bill.
Bye, Bill. We love you,
Bill. All right.
Cool. And then Woulg, get your plug on. Get your plug on.
You're next.
I made the Patreon thing while we were chatting.
Oh, sick!
I posted it in the chat. I'll post it in this chat too.
Shout yourself out.
Yeah,
all your stuff.
There's that. There's also my Bandcamp, woulg.bandcamp.com, or there's like the Bandcamp, or there's the where I sell my plugins, which is gumroad.com/woulg. I'll post some of those in there. Gumroad.
There we go. I'm your patron now.
Thanks, dude. What else is there for finding out stuff about me? I think that's basic. Honestly, like Instagram and Facebook are the best places to find me, and they're both like Instagram is I'm at Woulg on there, and then for Facebook it's woulg.music. facebook.com/woulg.music. It's also youtube.com/users or whatever /woulg. I'm just woulg on there, so you can find that there. Or you can find my streams, like uploads of my Twitch streams on there as well. Just search like woulg Twitch streams or something. I can't remember what the channel's called. Oh, Brocco's here. Maybe Brocco, can you post the link?
He's dedicated, man. He's doing streams from his hospital bed. I was like, yo, he's in the hospital with fleshy and he's doing educational live streams.
Dude.
Like, what a boss.
Legend. Absolute legend.
Yeah, if you haven't seen my video called Music on Drugs, it's on my YouTube channel. You can check it out.
It's pretty legendary, man. Pretty legendary.
Alrighty. Well, everyone say thank you so much to woulg. Thank you so much.
Thank you,
Woulg.
Woulg. You're the best.
Thank you. Thanks for having
me.
Cool.
I got you. Bye. Alrighty.
Right,
last but not least, thank you so much, by the way. I really
I found out about this
it.
like fully 10 minutes before it started.
Oh yeah, we
like,
had a bit of
I didn't even shave. Look at my beard. I didn't even shave. Yeah,
hey, I feel it. Well, thank you so much. Really,
hey, my
hopefully I
pleasure.
can have you on
great.
again. I was glad to
for sure.
kind of meet you and get to talk to you and everyone. This was super fun. So please do your whole spiel to everyone about your Twitch and your YouTubes and your Patreons and producer dojos and everything.
Yeah, there's basically there's two main ones. The best place to connect with me as an artist is at patreon.com/Ill.Gates. And there you can get like the tiers are really affordable, and you can get my whole discography at wave quality right away. And then if you go to the concert goer tier, which is only $5, you can get access to audio video concerts that I'm putting on, as well as my complete discography, and you can message me and all that stuff. So Patreon's definitely the best place to support me and to get my music, and you can get all my music like for $3 for all of my music ever, or $5 for that and concerts, and then you can just cancel a month later. So that's a pretty good deal, right? And then if you want to learn, my educational project is at producerdojo.com, where I have a community of educators that I have trained, and we do like one-on-one coaching. So it's not like a school. It's really all about what are the needs of the individual learner. And then they're taking, like my mentors that I've trained are taking people through this massive, like terabytes of lessons and stuff that I've done. I do a live class called the Weekly Download that I do every week. I did it yesterday, was episode 181. And there's classes on everything. Like I'm in the middle of a 4-part series on resampling. There's classes on philosophy, running a music business, workflow, sound design. I go through every different sound. Like there's a whole an hour plus on kicks. There's an hour plus on snares. There's an hour plus on hi-hats. And then they all come with projects and presets and stuff. And you get all that for $5 a week. So that's pretty crazy.
Sounds
and then
like a pretty fucking good deal.
Yeah, I think it's probably the best deal on the internet, considering how much stuff there actually is. And then you can come to the live class. And then if you want the one-on-one coaching, go to producerdojo.com and you can get one-on-one coaching, as well as the weekly download and a bunch of other stuff for $59 a month. And then you get an hour-long personal coaching session, as well as my archive of stuff. So it's pretty good value, across the board. But yeah, for me, Ill.Gates the artist, it's patreon.com/Ill.Gates or at Ill.Gates Music on most socials. And then for the Producer Dojo, that's producerdojo.com or theweeklydownload.com.
Awesome. Thank you so much. Everyone is spamming your links in chat. Everyone say,
hell yeah, thank you.
Thank you so much, Dylan. Thank you. Bye.
Thank you. Bye. Thanks for having me on. Bring me back.
No problem. We'll do.
All right,
Alrighty, bye. Anyways, I didn't mean to cut off so quickly. I apologize if you watch this. Thank you so much. I didn't realize I had my finger on the trigger a bit too early. Thank you so much, Ill.Gates. I really appreciate it. Thank you to Mr. Bill. Thank you to woulg. Thank you to everyone who hung out with me and hung out with us today. This was really fun. Let's do it again sometime soon. I really appreciate it. Apologies for the late start again. If you're watching this on YouTube, please be sure to like, comment, and subscribe. Hit the little bell. Do all that fun YouTube stuff. Please follow me on Twitch. Please follow me on Twitter. If you're watching this on Twitch, please follow me on Twitter. All my socials are Mussar Music, MUSSARMUSIC. Please drop those follows. I think that should be everything. So this is going to be where I cut the video on YouTube. Okay, so thank you all so much. This was super, super fun. I really, really appreciate it. You all are wonderful. Let's go find someone to raid. This was super fun. Let's do it again sometime soon. Who is live that we can raid? Let me double check that follow list. Or should we make someone's day? I feel like we should make someone's day. Let's see. Who is... Let's raid Bad Producer. We're going to go make Bad Producer's life. He's probably playing some crazy music that I can't hear, but you might be able to, but that's okay. We're going to go raid Bad Producer. We're going to go give him some love. Tomorrow, Arthur's playing Animal Crossing, and I want to raid someone who's making music, but I appreciate it. Thank you all so much. Tomorrow, Freebie Friday, challenges, feedback, and more. Maybe some weekend streams, no guarantees on that. Hopefully we can get the podcast coming to you real soon. Take care of yourself, take care of each other, be safe, be happy. I love you all so much. Please go spam some Mussar champs and some Mussar mafias and Bad Producer stream. Please go drop them a follow. Please